Welcome to Mic Drop, the podcast where relevancy is irrelevant and we don't give a shit about your feelings.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He is an author. He is the owner of Blauer Tactical Systems, the founder of the Spear system, which we'll get into very in depth. He's been in the martial arts, self-defense, and defensive tactics industry for almost 40 years. He works primarily with military and law enforcement of all calibers and entities. Most importantly, he uses Chuck Norris's tears to make his breakfast smoothies. Welcome to the stage, Tony Blauer.
Hey, man. I don't use Chuck's tears for smoothies. I just drink them straight. I just wanted to point that out.
I thought you were going to say lube. Oh. Yeah, I mean, you never know. But no, I appreciate you coming. You and I have been going back and forth and talking about getting you on here for quite a while. We linked up in San Diego just a few weeks ago,
right?
And kind of finalized it. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come all the way here. I know it's halfway across the country, and you're a busy guy. But I have no doubt that you guys, the listener, are going to thoroughly enjoy all of the different elements of what you do for a living. It's fascinating shit, because there's so much more to it than I think most people realize. So I appreciate you coming.
No, my pleasure. I've been a fan for a long time. You've also graciously tried to coach me and my family on how to care for our insane pack. We've got 5 dogs, and so it's cool to be here. I'm excited.
No, it's my pleasure to have you. And right before we get started, I do want to say that this podcast is sponsored by me, motherfucker. So go to teamdog.pet. If you have a dog, or even if you don't, choke yourself. If you want to look at the products, that's where you go, teamdog.pet. Just do it. All right. Quick lightning round. I do like to ask a few just kind of off-the-wall questions, and since your expertise lies in combatives, most of them are kind of geared towards that. But first thing that comes to your mind, who's the person you'd hate to have to fight the most?
Oh, wow. There's too many to mention. Need this closer? Right. Too many to mention.
Is there a name that just...
Fuck. Anybody who could beat me, I would hate to fight. I got asked, just not to detour that and not to deflect that. I've got a couple of friends. Shout out to Walt Lysak and his family, where I said if I ever had to fight Walt, I would definitely need an elephant gun.
Yeah,
just one of the scariest. Him and his brother Charlie, scary. I was just talking to a buddy in New York, and he said, in fighting, there's this, expression that there's always somebody that can beat you. There's always that person. And then we looked at each other and he said, like, the Lysaks that's the person. You get to, they're just this legendary family out of Massachusetts.
Are they enormous guys?
They're not enormous, but they're like Charlie. The captains of Crush hand grips.
Yeah.
So I think there's like a handful of people that can close a number 4, and less that can close a 5. I'm very strong, and it looks like I'm giving birth to a steer trying to close a 3. Right? I'm like, Charlie's name is up there, but I was doing a seminar for them at their school many years ago, and he's sitting behind me and he's rolling like a number 2, like he's just rolling it, which is just insane.
Like between his fingers.
Yeah, he's just going in my ear, just grinding it. But he says to me, like, can you do this? And I went and I said to him, what the fuck are you gonna do with your strong hands?
Yeah.
And he, from behind, just grabbed my trap and just started to pinch. And I'm sitting in the front, and my threshold for pain is pretty high. And I felt like he was gonna tear my trap off my body. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's good. I mean, just scary shit.
Yeah, and to me, what's scary about that is, like, you take a guy with that kind of freak mutant strength, and and get them very proficient at something like jiu-jitsu or grip strength.
Well, this is it. They're boxing, they're striking, they're jiu-jitsu, they're,
how old are they?
They're probably, so I'm 59, they're probably early 50s now.
Oh, shit. Have they ever fought MMA or anything like that? Or
No.
No, just beat people up?
No. They've been running schools for, 20, 30 years, and they're low key like that. But, we linked up somewhere, and in fact, I forget where I met Walt, but we went to the very first UFC in 1993. I was writing for 3 magazines, one in Australia, one in the UK, one in the USA, and I was cage side and saw all the first stuff, and when I think it was Shamrock tapped out Pat Smith and you do jiu-jitsu with an ankle lock. Well, in 1993, a lot of us, like, I'm American now, I'm a citizen now, but I was Canadian at the time, but a lot of us in North America were like, what the fuck is this shit?
Yeah.
Right? Because we're stand-up strikers.
Yeah.
And so we're back in our hotel room after, and I said to Walt, is this fixed? The guy grabbed his ankle and he tapped. What the fuck? He goes, no, if you have it on right, man, I could snap your ankle, snap your shin. I go, bullshit. So he says, you want me to show you? And at this point, I've known Walt like a year already, never shown me one jiu-jitsu move, right? Because he was bringing me in to do seminars, so I was always teaching my spear stuff. And so we sit down on the floor, and he gets me, in an ankle lock, and he sits there, and he goes like this, and he puts it on, and he just cinches it a little bit. I said, well, at this point here, man, I would just sit up, and I'm reaching to go grab him to come over the top, and as I do that, he goes, and, pain is the mother of invention, and I suddenly, my nervous system, at a cellular level, we move away from pain. And as I started to move forward and he cinched on, I felt my body lock up, even though my mind was grab his belt, punch him in the face.
Yeah.
And I locked back like this, and I was like, whoa. And I felt my shin bend, like bow the other way. And I was like, what the fuck? He goes, crazy, right? I said, well, I never felt anything like that. He goes, like, here it hurts. And I go, yeah. And he goes, and if I do this, and he goes like 1/8 of an inch more. And I always tell people, like, with regard to grappling, this is pain, a little bit more tears, a little bit more breaks.
It's
the incremental changes are, as you know, from injuries. Just like you put that pressure on. But it was insane. And I looked at him, I said, you know how to do this stuff? He goes, yeah, my dad's been teaching us stuff forever. I was like, well, why didn't you ever tell me? He says, well, it just
never came up.
It never came up.
Oh, that's fucking
crazy.
Classic. They sound like amazing guys. To me, what it highlights too, and makes me think of is just that, like, never done MMA. I wouldn't say I'm not going to say they're nobodies, but not household names the way a lot of these guys are. But just walking around, and my guess is you'd never know that they're as lethal as they are, and there's a lot of fucking people like that.
And I'll tell you this, and it's something that I get into a lot of philosophical trouble with in the combatives, DT, and self-defense community. So I've been teaching now 40 years. And I was always deliberately provocative because I wanted people to have realizations in the seminar. I didn't want them like in the hospital go, yeah, I shouldn't have, they're in a body cast and they're writing out, you should see the other guy. And well, oh, you won the fight, you were effective, but you weren't very efficient. Okay. And so I would ask people this question. I'd say, who'd you rather fight if it was a death match? Everyone here has decided we'll fight to the death. A black belt in martial arts, a boxer, a wrestler, or somebody who knows nothing. And the operant mindset is we're going to fight to the death. And depending on who the crowd was, they would always pre-select, one of the, trained people. And a lot of people back in the day, and I started asking this question before the UFC and MMA really took off. No one ever picked the untrained person. And I would always say, like, have you ever sparred with like your girlfriend or your wife or and you got boxing gloves on and they're asymmetric, they're not rhythmic, and they're like, and they hit you with these, and because you're trying to move and they're hitting you with these weird angles and weird syncopations. The untrained person, and this is why what throws people off, is everyone here has decided they're going to fight to the death. The person who knows nothing and is committed will do things you've never even thought of, which means your perception speed and reaction time are completely messed. Everyone else has what's the neurotransmitters of myelinization in their brain. I know right away if I'm in a confrontation and a guy blades a little bit and he takes a distance, I go, oh, he's a striker. I can tell by body language, which is 60% of communication, what somebody's going to do.
Yeah.
So, we have a maximum: careful what you practice, you might get really good at the wrong thing. And so, coming back full circle to what you said, who would have thought? Here's like a nobody. That's you ask me, who's been around the industry for 40 years, who's the last person you want to fight? And I go, this guy that you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of myths out there, and I've tried to do this in the most positive way. I was on a knife fighting podcast, and they said, who's the most dangerous knife fighter in the world? I said, some guy in jail who killed someone with a knife. Yeah. It's not who you were thinking about. We think about all the knife fighting gurus.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned with the guy that's actually murdered somebody with a knife than somebody who's practiced their art.
So, somebody that has the mentality and intent, vice just the skill set without that.
At the end of the day, when we're really asking the question, it's that intent. Mm-hmm. Who throws a harder shitty haymaker?
Yeah.
A terrorist or a drunk, if it's a shitty haymaker.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say the terrorist, somebody who's willing to die for their cause, throws a shittier movement because of the emotional intent.
Yeah. The neat parallel that I think that exists between what you do and what I do is exactly that, is the intent and the emotion. And what's neat about dogs is that there's no bluffing really.
Right.
With the exception of raised hackles and curled back lips and defensive edginess where dogs will throw up some peacock feathers to try to make you decide, I don't want any. But outside of that, when you're really working a dog in a bite suit and teaching them how to naturally forwardly aggressive or in a naturally forward aggressive nature come forward and actually bring that offense to the human being, it relies 100% on my intent and my ability to communicate my intent to him, both offensively and submissively in this case. And that, I'm gonna bring pressure offensively, and I'm gonna put that dog into defense because of what I'm doing and mostly because of my intent. And then when he responds the way that I want, I'm gonna take all of that away, and I'm gonna reward his natural forward aggressiveness towards me with submission and saying, okay, you win. Mm-hmm. And over time, just like with building, say, muscle mass or getting good at fighting or whatever, is that you build a threshold and you basically create and manufacture his ability to take more and more pressure and fight harder and more wide open. But that intent component is frankly where I see most decoys and dog folks mess up, is it's manufactured and it's totally bullshit, and the dog can see right through it. So it's a hard thing to be able to turn on and off like a fucking light switch, but you have to be able to do it. And just, to your point, yes, absolutely. Like, to me, you see MMA fighters, getting fucking beat half to death by guys that know nothing because they jump them, or, there's more than one of them, or they catch them off guard, or they're just nasty.
Yeah. And one of the things in our program, and when I say my program, is almost everybody I train, and there are some interesting parallels because you work with dogs that have a ton of experience, mm-hmm. right? So most of the people that come to me already have a ton of experience, and they're missing something, and sometimes they don't know what it is, or sometimes something happens and they realize, oh shit, I got a letter from a guy that, martial arts for years. He got jumped in the street by a couple of dudes, and he went fetal. He flinched, and he's like, that wasn't supposed to happen, because mm-hmm. he had through osmosis or bought off on this, I don't want to say it's a myth, but hey, when you get to this level, you're safe.
Yeah.
And you're not. Mm-hmm. The rules of life, like I like to tell people, violence doesn't care what style you study, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
Violence doesn't care. But what happens is when a stimulus is introduced too quickly, your body's physiological system kind of hijacks the executive function. So you thought you were going to be super cool, And I could be thinking, oh, I'm on Mike's podcast here, and if I looked down and there was a fucking snake or a spider here, I wouldn't look very cool. I'd be like, oh, like, and so we need to respect that physiology and build it into our self-defense practice.
Yeah, it's fascinating shit, and I'm really looking forward to getting further into a lot of those elements as we work through.
We didn't get very far in the lightning round, did we?
Well, we got balls deep in the lightning round. Moving on to the next question. What's the most embarrassing moment during teaching a course that's ever happened to you?
Wow. My answer is going to be sort of obnoxious. I love what I do so much, and I've been doing this now for decades. I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about drills. We got a course going on in Ireland with 3 trainers at. I'm on the weekend going, hey, try this drill, do this like this. We're still tweaking shit. Nothing embarrassing has ever happened at a course. Yeah. Because it's so organic and so natural. And I know it's a fucking bullshit, lame, like. I honestly can't even think. I can think of a embarrassing moment. Lots of them. Like when my son was born. I don't know why this popped in my brain. It's got nothing. My son was born. I was at a restaurant with him, and he's sitting on the table in his car seat, and maybe I was just thinking about this because it's recently Father's Day, and this woman comes over and she goes, oh my God, he's so cute. How old is he? He's gorgeous. And I looked at her, I said, when are you due? And she stands up and goes, I'm not pregnant. I mean, like, but that's got nothing to do with the class.
Well, I mean, to me, I think it boils down to perspective, or at least that's my impression of your answer is that, A, if you love what you do, but B, if you look at everything as learning experience, then you won't ever be embarrassed because everything that maybe didn't go as planned is just part of the process and you're learning from it. So I think it speaks more to your perspective than anything else, which is neat. Most memorable training course, good or bad? Is there anyone that pops up that's just like, holy shit, the first thing that... on 9/11, I was on Fort Bragg. And the particular unit that I was working with twice before, I was in the last 2 years before 9/11, when I'd come in on 2 occasions, they deployed in the middle of the week, to the point where the joke was, let's bring Tony back, because every time Tony comes down, so we can go to work.
Something happens, we go to work. And so here I am working with these guys. 9/11 hits, we're upstairs, no shit, and I don't talk about this a lot, and I'll be a little cryptic for obvious reasons. We're doing some knife stuff, and I've been working with these guys, in the past, so we're picking up stuff and covering things. And so we'd have some different guys who come and watch the class who weren't part of this particular element. And one of the guys is standing there like this. So I stop, and bad attitudes piss me off. I can't let them go. And so I go, hey, I don't know if you know this, but body language is 60% of communication. And so it looks like you have a question. He goes, no, I don't. I go, well, you're standing there with your arms crossed. But it's not like arms crossed, like, wow, what is this? It's like arms crossed, like, what is this? Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, what's this got to do with our mission? And and you'll remember this. Do you remember? I don't remember who it was. Never knew the name. It was a SEAL who was stabbed to death outside of Hot Tuna. Yep. In Virginia.
I don't remember his name, but I remember it very clearly.
Yeah. So that had just happened the year before. Mm-hmm. And people knew about it, and at the tier 1 levels, the government's spending like over $1 million to get you there in terms of cumulative training. Yeah. And what I said, one of your colleagues from another, vertical in the military was stabbed at. Now he probably knew how to use a sniper rifle, and he probably knew how to do CQB, and he probably knew how to fast route and skydive, and low crawl and blow up doors and shit, but he didn't understand mano a mano self-defense outside of his elements.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's our blind spot. You want to know what your blind, if you seek what your blind spot is, that makes you safer, right? And I said, so it just occurred to me that, when's the last time a 12-man element was mugged, raped, jumped, pickpocketed, and it never happens, right? Mm-hmm. And so today what we're doing is we're working over some personal defense stuff. And meanwhile, while I'm doing this kind of lecture to this guy, 9/11's happening, and of course, the weapon of choice was a box cutter. And so this is a combo of regret, but awe of, as it started to happen, nobody knew the totality of it at that point. So when one of the guys came up the ladder and said, you guys, we got to get down here and look at this, everyone kind of looked at me and went, and winked and did this, going, oh, Tony's here, fucking shit's happening.
Yeah.
Went downstairs, second plane's hitting the tower, and the news is doing this, and they were looking at me, and then when they realized it, holy shit.
Yeah.
So most crazy thing is for a guy whose biggest passion is helping our first responders, military, law enforcement, firefighters, anybody, train. So to be there and see, at the time I was Canadian, to see the armed forces just mobilized and what went on there, I'll never forget that. It was insane.
I can only imagine, because I know I was at SEAL Team 3 at that time. The platoon that I was in was getting ready to get started again. And I know that there was an unspoken feeling, that nobody had to say what it was or talk about it or whatever, but everybody felt it and understood it. Was there a huge element of that there that was just like almost a stoic sense of urgency?
There was a lot of, I don't think anybody in the first couple hours, so it was very fascinating, because there were a bunch of foreign nationals on post, and next thing you know, like within minutes, they're all corralled and guys watching them, and they're sitting there like like POWs, but they were like just sorry. And I was, within a couple hours escorted off post, because I was Canadian. At first, I'm sitting in one of the armories, and guys are just loading shit and grabbing shit, and it was like I was sitting there, like it was surreal. Mm-hmm. I was like, holy shit. At first, I think people were, and I'm talking about the first couple hours. Yeah. It was cavalier. It was like, man, okay, let's let's do this, right? And but probably the and I don't know how to describe this without either being flaky or sounding cocky or whatever. But the other times they had been called out and deployed, I just went home. They said, hey, thanks, it was great. And then this time they called me up. It was, I think, midweek. I didn't hear from them for a day. Airports were closed, so I was stuck. And I'm, in Fayetteville, and I got a call from one of the guys and said, hey, we can't get you on post, but we'd like to continue the training. Do you know somebody? And so it was just like this huge honor that they wanted to finish out the training, and it became very specific around this. You asked about like when I saw them after the daybreak, they came in, and there was this like unspoken cohesiveness, like a single-mindedness of, we know exactly what we need to do. Yeah. And that was, I got goosebumps right now just thinking about that. Yeah. But that was crazy.
Yeah, no, it's obviously, for the reasons why it's happening are fucking horrible, but going through those types of experiences are unforgettable. No doubt about it. It's a great story. I appreciate you sharing it. This is, not a loaded question, but equally tough or ambiguous, I guess. If you had to pick one piece of training gear that you can own as it relates to combatives, what would that be?
Wow. I mean, the clever, quick answer would be, a first aid kit.
Yeah.
And I say that, I want everyone listening to the show to think about that, because I forget what movie it was with Vin Diesel. It's some futuristic thing where he sticks his teacup through the guy's head.
Yeah.
I don't know and then he goes, death by teacup. And, whether the shit's true or not, but, I look around the room here and there's about 10 things that either one of us could pick up and smash somebody with, stick it through their ear, in their eye, in their mouth, but if in that exchange, suddenly you look down and you go, oh, that's a really bad cut. If I didn't know, if I didn't have, and so you can save a lot of lives, including yourselves with that. And a lot of people, you knew this, but a lot of the civilians in the world never thought about how important tactical first aid was until all the active shooters became a big thing. So
or even just coming up on a bad car accident one time, and you'll never not think about it again. I know. Yeah, I mean, I keep shit everywhere. Every vehicle has a blowout and first aid kit. I've got same for dogs in every vehicle, every place I'm at. But no, it's a great answer.
And it's just to throw this in there because it's maybe like anticlimactic for anyone that was sitting there going, "Oh, what type of gun was he going to say?" So I've got, all sorts of guns and knives, and I think that, like at sudden close quarter, aside from my dogs alerting and stuff, is I've got a couple of really nice tomahawks. And guns can jam and they can get knocked out or redirected, and you can run out of ammo, and so my answer whenever we do any scenario training, the answer to every question is what's the scenario. When people train with me, I always trick them. I go, hey, what would you do here? Someone grabbed you like this, you're up against the wall, and they'll give the answer. Go, that's the wrong answer. You don't know what the scenario is. Until you know what the scenario is, you can't threat discriminate and select the. So so tomahawk and first aid kit.
Yeah, I like the fucking samurai sword for the same reason, is that it's such a broad angle that we'll get them everywhere. But no, it's great shit. Right. Favorite cheat meal?
Oh man, pizza.
Hey man, I'm right there with you. Favorite exercise? Actually, before we do that, just because all you guys are going to ask, did he have the ribs? Yes. Okay, I made Tony the ribs. So
and I want to say, I don't know, like, I'm not saying this because we're on the show, and they were the best ribs I've ever had. They were, and I said this to you in the kitchen. I said, you could put a lot of restaurants out of business.
Well, there you have it, folks. It's unanimous, I guess. Tony says
it's freaking. They were awesome.
So amen on that. I appreciate it. It's become a tradition of, and there's been a couple of guests here recently that didn't get them. The smoker was down, and so they were pretty upset about that. And I haven't heard the end of it, but that's good shit. Favorite exercise, and you can only pick one.
Well, let me slow down the lightning and say, about 2 years ago, I had a couple of injuries, my back, my neck, that impacted my facial nerve, and I haven't been able to work out and I've been like an intense workout, like my whole life. Yeah. And so that's impacted me emotionally a lot.
Sure.
If I could only pick one, and then if I could just heal everything and get moving again, like I haven't picked up a barbell in 2 years. Mm-hmm. I haven't even hit a heavy bag. I'll pitter patter, move around, but I miss fucking punching shit.
Yeah.
and so, if I could only pick one thing, the rest of my life, it would be my heavy bag.
Yeah. I dig it. It's a good stress relief.
And I'll tell you what, if you get a heavy bag, so I used to have at one of my schools, I had a 400-pound bag, I had 75 heavy speed bags, but you work out on a bag, and I mean, you look at middleweight bodies of boxers. I mean, those guys, you can stay in great shape, but it's also an incredibly cathartic movement. Smashing shit.
Oh yeah,
is very cathartic.
Yeah, I mean, to me, jiu-jitsu is similar that way, in a little bit of a different way because it's largely humbling, whereas a heavy bag is generally not as much, but equally so. That, to me, speaking to your injury, I tore my tricep 100% tear back late last year and had surgery, and same thing. I've been active for the last 3 decades. And so to be in a position where now, I can still do stuff, but nowhere near like I could from a big, complex, dynamic, every fucking thing I have, body weight movement, have not been able to do it. And I'm just finally now getting back into it. It's fucked with my head too. It's not been good for me, I'll tell you that. But, what is your morning routine?
Before I've dabbled with a bunch of different ones, and like many entrepreneurs who haven't figured out how to scale their enterprise, I do like 10 or 11 different things. So so I used to be all over the place with stuff, but I have a very specific routine now that before I get out of bed, I listen to a couple of guided meditations that really kind of get me focused and get me in a more parasympathetic state, which is, you spend 30 years like being on guard, and this, and you're just like, I'm just always like, okay, let's kill somebody. Like, you're just, and so I do that for about 20 minutes. And then after that, and this will screw me up sometimes, if I know I'm working on something big, I'll reset my mind and then I'll check email. But usually I won't check email for a good solid hour. I'll try to get into the garage, do a little mobility and stretch. I pound a lot of water. I've been talking to some people who just really believe that most of us are really dehydrated and we don't realize it. Mm-hmm. So, I have a little, I do my meditation, I'll get up, kitchen, drink, I waterboard myself a little bit. I'm like, okay, that's too much water. Yeah. And then kind of the day kicks in. Yeah.
Do you not eat?
Yeah, I don't intermittent fast. I'll just go, okay, I'm not going to eat this morning. Yeah. And then I'll eat around 11 or 11:30. Yeah. But I usually have a breakfast. I eat super, healthy, cleanish stuff. But I'm around, I've been around CrossFitters and athletes and stuff like that. So I've dabbled in all the stuff, but I've got the most, like we could be talking about discipline and you slide like a brownie in front of me or some ice cream or a cake. And I'll be like, yeah, turn the camera off. I got I got a really bad sweet tooth.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't buy the shit because if I have it, I'll just eat all of it. So if it's around, I'll fuck it up unequivocally. Do you prescribe to keto or paleo or anything like that, or you just try to keep it fucking simple?
The easiest thing to remember and the hardest thing to do when it comes to nutrition is to stop when you're comfortable. Yeah. And so a lot of it is, so my answer is like yes, no. Something will come out, like if I read something about keto, okay, I'm doing this for a month or two. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go, I'm really missing some carbs in my diet. And then there's a school of thought that just is like, your body's just breaking down shit. So I'm going to exaggerate this and we'll probably get some nutritionist, write me and tell me what an idiot I am. But like they go like, protein, fat, and carbs, like your body doesn't really care where you get it from. It just wants those things. It's almost like code. Yeah. Don't know if that's true or not, but I've made great gains and felt really healthy. Just going, okay, my carbs for today is going to be like this apple, and then later I'm going to have a brownie, and I'm going to have like if you're counting your macros. Yeah. But in general, like I'll look for organic, clean. Yeah. And like when you served your food, my brain immediately went, okay, you don't get any more paleo than this or keto than this. You're just eating meat. Yeah.
Savory fucking meat. I mean, to me, when it's that rich, you don't need to eat a lot of it, and it tied you over a long fucking time, which is why I eat a lot of that kind of stuff. For me, Not to get too off on a tangent, but I like, similarly, I eat till I'm full. I only eat when I'm hungry, and I try to make it as clean as possible. I mean, I do, to me, it just makes sense that the cleaner and more wholesome that whatever the fucking ingredients that you're eating are, typically the better. But
and I do feel like this morning I got up and because of the back and neck stuff, I'll get some like bilateral nerve shit going down on my legs, and this morning it was like kind of aggravated, and I know that anytime I overdo sugar, so yesterday just because the trip in, I had to get on a different flight, and I got up at 4 a.m, and I was like, when I usually get it run down, I'll eat some shitty carbs just to push me, and then the sugar crash. But I do notice anytime I consume like a dessert, the next day I feel it in my body. Yeah, and that's crazy.
No, I know. I mean, sugar is fucking terrible.
Right.
I mean, there's no two ways about it. I think if there's one thing we as a society have learned nutrition-wise is that shit is bad. Really irrespective.
Why does it taste so good, though?
I think that's the deal, right?
That's the deal, right?
Everything that's wrong is fucking enjoyable. I am curious about from a sleeping standpoint. I've had some other folks on the podcast that are very particular, and I have become that as I've gotten older and more banged up. Pretty fucking particular about the mattress I sleep on and using a chili pad and certain sheets and fucking making sure it's dark and a certain temperature and all this kind of routine shit. Do you give any credence? Do you have a particular routine that way?
Yeah, I have a really technical bed, and whatever that means. Just I tried a bunch of them, and I'll get into bed, and my wife will be lying there, and I'll get into bed, and I'll sit and as soon as I hit the mattress, I'm like, oh my God, that's good. And you're like, you'd think we were maybe filming a porno or something, but no, I was just sitting down on the mattress. Yeah. So, a really good mattress is important, especially if you were like a tactical athlete where your body is banged up, and most people have shitty posture anyways from over their phone and driving and sitting at desks. So I try to, okay, we got to go to bed at this time. I try to
Do you typically get up early, or is there a certain time?
I get up just when my body clock wakes me, and fortunately, I work for myself. I have an amazing team that does, like I said, earlier on, we've got, 3 trainers at a course in Ireland. We had, 2 or 3 courses last week, and I'm not at them, so after decades in here, I've got an amazing team. I do some courses. So I get up when I want, but I also work when I have to, right? As you know. But I typically will wake up, depending on travel and how hard I worked the day before, between 5 and 7, somewhere in that window. Yeah.
Or do you try to, I'm assuming it's the same answers as much as you need, but do you find that X number of hours is kind of your sweet spot?
I think I've always been a light and shitty sleeper when it comes to statistics. And I think that I've never done it and measured it. There's a lot of people that are like, oh, they got their watch that measures their shit and all that. I'm a light sleeper, man. I think I'm always tired. Yeah. So it'd be an interesting study at a sleep clinic.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. So to me, like all of these things, I like to ask A, because I'm curious, and B, because in these types of lines of work, like that shit is half of it. How you eat, how you sleep, how much of it you get, all of those things are big contributing factors. And I know a lot of the listeners, are pretty into that kind of shit.
A lot of it also is age.
Yeah. For sure.
I don't do it enough, but a few times in the middle of the day, I'm like, I'm gonna take a nap. Yeah. And it's fucking amazing. And I'm like, why don't I do that more often?
Yeah. Even if it's like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
And I'll do that. I'll just tune off, and I'll go meditate for 10, 20 minutes, just like lie back, and I have a and it's crazy because I have a zero gravity chair in my office.
Yeah.
So it's like right there, and I don't even, it's got fucking bags and gear on it and stuff like that instead of my ass.
Yeah.
But recharging is important. But if you got somebody listening to the show who's in their 20s, they're going like, look at these old fucks, as opposed to, when the real thing is to listen to your body.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. No, 100% it is. And on that same note, preventative maintenance goes a long way for all you young assholes that are criticizing us for being old guys talking about Ensure and fucking diapers. But moving on, I just to provide some context and backstory on you, I am curious. You said you're from Canada. Can you talk about just your childhood and growing up there and kind of what that was like?
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs. I guess would be considered middle class. I grew up in the '60s during. It was the original Wild Wild West and Mannix in the street. It was like the TV generation. You were glued to the TV, and played outside a lot.
What town was that?
It was a little town called Chomedy, Laval. It was outside Montreal.
Oh, okay.
So Montreal is like 6 hours north of New York. For people that don't have perspective, and it was. It's funny when people say, when I hear people say, well, I had a pretty normal childhood. I don't know what that is. Like my childhood was just my childhood.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a generation where like smoking was the cool thing. Like I would come downstairs and my mom, I remember like a party where there's like 10 ladies there, some Tupperware party, and everyone is smoking. Like it was like out of like and I remember some of these scenes almost in black and white, not in color, like an old TV show. Yeah. And they're all like, and I remember coming down going, I don't know why this memory just popped in my head, and it was like, and I asked her, I go, what are you guys doing? And she said, we're smoking, dear. I go, what's smoking? She goes, here, and she hands me a cigarette. My mom wasn't like an abusive mom, like an idiot like that. She just handed me to look at. And she let me take a puff, which was the most disgusting thing. I mean, almost like, and I'd never ever touched a cigarette, like ever. So it was like a, kind of a weird, because I don't get smoking when someone, but it was just, I played sports.
What sports did you play?
Canada's pretty
hockey,
lame.
Right?
Well, you're either a skier or a skater.
Yeah.
In Canada, my family were all skiers.
Oh,
so you're literally, those are the two big sports, skiing and skating.
Yeah.
Hockey or skiing. So I grew up on skis. I was, I think, being dragged around on the hill when I was like 2 years old, 1.5 years old.
Yeah.
Between my mom and my dad's legs, teach me how to do stuff. So, I ended up teaching skiing, competing in freestyle and downhill.
Oh shit.
At one point, it was like all I was doing am I maybe going to try out for the Olympic team for skiing? I don't know if I was ever that good, but that, when you're part of it, like a team at a hill, you're looking at the people that are really on that trajectory.
And that's the goal.
Yeah. And it never, well, that was the thing, is like growing up in the 60s and 70s, even like in the mid 70s, like now, if you ask a kid what they want to be, they might say, well, I'm gonna design a new app for, I mean, there's like just so many crazy things, where back then it was like literally, like there were 2 or 3 things that you discussed in your family. It was like, are you going to go into the family business, or are you going to be a lawyer or a doctor? Yeah. Up in Canada.
Yeah.
So do
you still ski at all, or is that something?
I haven't skied in decades, and it was crazy. There was when I started teaching full time in my 20s, I started to wean off stuff, because I was teaching 7 days a week. Like I had 40, 50 students. Most of them were private, and so. To go skiing, I had to drive up to the mountains. So it was like a 2-hour drive, and the hills we have in Quebec aren't like the Rockies. So you wait in line for an hour, and then it takes you, at the level I was at, it literally took me 30 seconds to get down the hill. That got monotonous really fast when I was starting to think about my business.
Yeah.
I was also a very aggressive skier, so I always had hard falls and wiped out because I was doing moguls and jumps and shit like that.
Yeah.
I couldn't afford to. I was trying to build my business. I couldn't afford to get injured. So I was like,
I thought it was free healthcare up there.
there it is.
You know, I have to take that shot. We talk about shit like this all the time. I am curious to get your take on that real quick. Is what?
You know what? I'm stunned at what I pay for insurance in the States, and then anytime anything is done, it's never covered.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the fuck? And so when that happens, I'm like, I remember when I used to just give this like plastic card up in Quebec and Medicare, and like this was covered. It could be an operation, it could be a visit to the doctor.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know all the rules and regulations, but you know, you continued, like all the doctors took the Medicare up there, and you could go to the doctor you wanted.
Yeah.
So
the one thing, I mean, I'm curious for you. I mean, prior to Obamacare, at least, you know, I didn't have decades of paying for health insurance prior to that, but I did have a few years of, before that was enacted, of being an entrepreneur and having health insurance for a small family. And it was much better prior to that.
Right.
Now it's fucking useless. Like there's really no point in having it.
It's infuriating.
Yeah. But I'm just fucking throwing it in there as a point of contention. But it made me think of having that level of exposure and experience to downhill skiing and being aggressive. That had to have paid enormous dividends for follow-on fight type of training, of having that type of center of gravity awareness and strength. And
it does, but it did, but it was all unbeknownst to me. An interesting thing, which, and I'll slip it in here. I grew up afraid of everything.
Really?
Yeah, and I grew up like, even as like 5, 6, 7 years old, if I was walking around a building, I'd be thinking like what if there's a dog there? What if there's a bad guy there? What if there's a this? I was very drawn to any action TV show. Like if there was a fight, it could be like, you know, Frank Sinatra, Manchurian Candidate, doing like the shittiest choreography, you know, doing a chop like this, right? And I'd be like, what was that? What was that?
Like the old Batman stuff.
Yeah. And I remember, because I wrestled, and so I, you know, as in school as gymnasts, as wrestlers, and I loved the training, and I loved learning, and I loved being coached. I dreaded the competition.
Yeah.
And it's a thing where, you know, in psychobabble, they talk about like a self-sabotage, right? So it was like I would always, what if this? What if I lose? What if I get my leg broken here? What if? And that was the thing. I go, I'd love to go skiing, but I can't. Here's an example. Here I am in my 20s, you know, building my business, and I'm thinking about, what if I wipe out and break my leg? I won't be able to teach for fucking months. You know, it doesn't matter that my operation to reset it is free. I'm fucked. Like you know, and so my whole life has been colored or discolored, however you want to look at it, with this, you know, almost this unsolicited like fear narrator while I'm doing great stuff. So I've always wrestled with truly enjoying what's going on.
Yeah.
And so when I develop the system that we teach now, the most important part of it is developing a different relationship with fear and the psychology of fear.
Yeah.
So, you know, going back to your ski question, is like, you know, I in one race, I tell this story all the time because it was like a defining moment that I didn't know was defining until thinking about it like decades later. But top of the hill, we're above the tree line, the wind is howling, you know, it's icy and blistery and freezing, and my coach is there and he's rubbing my knees and getting me ready, and he goes, you know, and the other skiers are in the gate, and and I'm like 5 minutes away from taking off, and he says to me, "How do you feel, kid?" And I looked at him and I went, "Great, coach." Now, I really wanted to projectile vomit on his face. I was my heart was pounding.
Yeah.
I was vertically breathing, shallow breathing, but I was like, great coach. And I'd already pissed like 5 times, right? And I take off. And so I was one of the best skiers on the team, but I never, ever finished a race. I always wiped out from just going too hard. And so it was never like, where's Tony? Oh, he didn't show up again. Oh, I got sick last night. It wasn't like that shit. So it was an interesting dichotomy of like the guy it wasn't like the guy who's always talking shit. And then, my car broke down. Yeah, your car always breaks down.
Yeah.
I was there. I was in the arena, but I wasn't enjoying it. And when I was skiing, so on this particular race, which is a big zone race for like if you did really well at this, you went up to the national level. And so I caught my tip about 3 gates from the finish line, and I was going so hard that I actually fell through the finish line, right? But I was disqualified. I missed a gate.
Yeah.
Someone came up to me, so they have different timers, timing you different, and a guy comes up to me, says, man, you were killing it. He probably didn't say that back in the 70s, but whatever that expression would have been, you were skiing fast. You were killing it, brother. And he goes, when you passed me, you were about a second ahead of the guy that ultimately won the race.
Wow.
Which is second in a giant slalom race is like a mile in a car race. I mean, it's a significant gap. So I always had that, I always had the skill, but I never could hit the zone. I could never hit flow that modern neuroscientists talk about.
It was like you pulled a homer during every competition.
I don't know if it was like that cartoony and stupid, but it was because I've had a ton of amazing experiences, but even I could be talking to 500 people online, at a live presentation that's being streamed, and my heart's pounding. I'm freaking nervous. I'm on live TV, and know that I'm like hitting everything I want, and then come off the stage and go, "Fuck! I forgot to say this." And I don't know, like,
yeah.
I don't know if that's
for sure
passion or overthinking or
Well, I think it's a combination of probably more passion and just being very particular. I know there's not an episode that I've done recorded that afterwards I was like, fuck, I wish we would have talked about this. Not a single fucking one of them. There's always something, at least one thing. I mean, a lot of times there's multiple things, but before we kind of get into the transfer of that into self-defense, combatives, etc., did you have any siblings and hobbies, relationship with your parents? Like, can you just kind of provide some color to that?
Sure. So I had a bizarre relationship with my dad. Never got close to him. He was a true, from a kid's perspective, a workaholic in the sense that I never saw him. He was always at work, and would say things to me like, why can't you be more like so-and-so? Like when I wouldn't do shit around the house. So I was an athlete and an artist, and he wanted me to, build shit with him in the garage and clean shit. And I didn't, why can't you be more like Jamie? I was like, oh, fuck you, Dad. Like, okay. I was very close to my mom, but we grew up in a the 60s was, I can remember sitting around with friends talking about who had a worse beating from their parents.
Oh, shit.
It was like that culture. It was like, yeah, my mother, my mother grabbed me by the hair and threw me in my room. Oh, yeah, my mother broke her brush over my head. And we were like sitting around like kids, like talking about it like card collecting, which was fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like weird in that sense. Other than that, it was a normal childhood. Yeah. I had 2 sisters. Didn't get really close with them. I'm closer with my older sister. She's younger than me. The eldest. She's 7 years younger than me. Not very close with my. It was weird, and it's something that I regret when I see families. I remember going out to dinner one night, and this is before everyone was on their fucking phone all the time. I remember going out to dinner one night with a girlfriend in Montreal, and I saw this mother and father and their 2 kids like talking the whole meal, like leaning into each other and laughing and talking. And I remember like being like in awe of that. So,
So there wasn't a lot of that. No. Sunday dinners.
So it was very ceremonial and I don't think my parents or my sisters ever watched the show. So, but it was, but I don't think that they didn't. I think there was just something going on with that glitch in the matrix.
Yeah.
Like, did we love each other? Do we love each other? Of course. Were we there doing all the right things? Yeah, but there wasn't like that connection that I felt, and I knew it should have been there.
Yeah.
So that's always, and it's something that I tried to do, for better or worse, raising my kids. I got 3 kids. But you asked me a couple other things. There's my family, my sisters.
Any hobbies?
Hobbies, fanatic skier, all the sports. And then when I was 13, I started Taekwondo. That became, martial arts every single day.
Yeah.
All I ever thought about, discovering Bruce Lee kind of like changed things for me.
Yeah.
And I played guitar.
Oh, that's fucking rock. Do you still play at all? Or?
Embarrassingly, no. I got them hanging in my. I'll pick them up every once in a while and go, "Wow, did I ever get shit?"
Yeah.
But I used to play a ton. I used to have a little studio in my house and write stuff and play in a band, and I loved music.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I still play a little bit. I don't make it a priority enough to be good at it, but I do enjoy it occasionally. So you started Taekwondo at 13. I am curious, in Canada at that time, what was there to choose from?
Taekwondo.
That was it. Yeah.
It was, Enter the Dragon had just come out. Bruce Lee had just passed away. It was 1973. And I had just gotten beat up by 2 guys. And I came home. I was 12 years old. It was just a year before. Leaving, some pickup game at the local elementary school. The elementary school was about maybe 500 or 1,000 yards away from the high school. And I was walking out by myself, jaunting out there, walking kind of like Conor McGregor, excited, like had a good game. And these 2 guys that were a couple years older, and there's a big difference when you're 12 and somebody's 14 or 15.
Yeah,
there's a big difference.
Yeah.
And they go, "Hey kid," and I'm like, "Yeah." And they go, "You go to school here?" "Yeah." Like, what grade you in? "Oh, 5." Or, "Oh, you coming to high school next year?" "Yeah." And I point over there, and when I point, "Yeah, I'm going to Western Laval," and he sweeps my arm and pulls me in back here, so I'm like pinned backwards. And he goes, "Well, welcome to fucking high school, kid." And the other kid steps in. And he goes to, the term, I don't know if you remember the term tachypsyche from training. It's a fancy term for everything goes into slow motion. So it's from survival learning research, and it's a big, obnoxious, obsequious word, like obsequious, right? and everything goes into slow motion. And I think, like, I've been now watching people get beat up on TV, right? And what happens anytime somebody gets one shot on TV?
Fucking
they're
knocked
done.
out.
Like, it's not a protracted fight for, So I'm like thinking, I'm fucking dead here, right? And this slow bolo punch comes around, man. And as it gets close to hitting me, I get ready to fucking have my ribs broken and fucking die right there, right? So I scream, like I'm about to get murdered. I go, whack, it hits me, but I scream so loud and so forceful. And it was the funny part here, if you can visualize this, it was when I finally kind of peeled the onion to figure out what had happened, again, like maybe 10 years later, it was the fact that I'd watched all those shows. It's like someone getting shot and falling down and passing out, and they go, "No, you just got nicked in the arm," right? It was like the psychosomatic impact
conditioning,
of it. Yeah. But I screamed so loud that they thought they hurt me. So the guy, whap, he nails me, and I'm like, and I went, and they looked at each other, and I knew instinctively I needed to make another sound, and that would end this confrontation. So I did some sort of heaving like this, and they looked, in panic, and they fucking took off running.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Like, they ran around the corner, when they were out of eyesight, I like looked up. I went, fucking couple of ass. I was totally fine. I knew I was fine. I fixed my shirt and went home and said to my dad, I just got beaten up. You know, you look fine. Oh, well, I'm fine, but I just got beaten up. Two guys. I learned so much from that about manipulating behavior, about feigning fear, about psychology, about mindset, about things going to slow motion, how resilient the human body is. I didn't realize it then at 12, but what happened was my dad said, you better learn how to defend yourself. You got to learn some martial art. Enter the Dragon launched, immediately looking. There was one school, you know, about a mile and a half away from my house. It was a Taekwondo school. I went there and fell in love with martial arts.
Yeah. We'll definitely get back to that first time and some of the psychological intricacies of what happened and how that speaks volumes to present day and self-defense mentalities and mechanisms. I am curious, I guess, so when you fall in love with that, you're still skiing, you're going through high school. Can you tell us about the transition, you know, from high school into the world of martial arts combatives and how that transpired?
Something happened when I started studying Bruce Lee and reading his biography and all the books and all the stories about him, where, you know, and there were millions of people that were impacted by him, right? You know, he's like, you know, up there for people with Jesus and Elvis and Bruce and like
Gandhi.
there were like a few iconic humans that fed some sort of inspiration and direction for people. But I remember, you know, reading about his story about how, you know, the prejudice he had overcome and how he trained and some of the obstacles he had, and, you know, coming back to the States and him wanting to be in the movies but being typecast and all these, and it just sounded like my story, even though I was 14 or 15, right? It's like, you just relate to this. And I remember one of the things he wrote, a note to himself, to hell with circumstances, I'll make my own circumstances. And I always, like at 15 years old, that shouldn't be like your motto, right? I mean, like, I was like, I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of not having direction. But there was something that changed when I went to martial art class. There was a reverence, there was a focus where I felt like I was doing something. But there was this crazy, like, everyone in class, right? Have you done stuff besides jiu-jitsu? Okay. So, you know, like in a lot of the stand-up martial arts stuff, there's the ki, right? You know, so I'm like 14 years old, and we're like doing a form. At the end of each form, you're going ki, and I would never ki. If like the instructor would go and yell ki, no ki, and all the class would do it, and I go like, why am I yelling? Why am I yelling before a punch? Won't my opponent, and I didn't use this language, be startled by my yell? Like, why would I? And I just knew there was something wrong with that. And I've gotten into arguments with people like if you yell at me before you hit me, there's a good chance that my body's survival system is going to respond to that, and it's going to contract. And if it contracts, I'm more resilient. So I would always mouth it in class because I didn't want to disrespect my instructor. So there'd be like 30 students going ki, and everybody would be yelling ki, and I'd be going.
Yeah.
I just like weird. I remember like little things, you know, little things like that. I still love the training, but what I'm getting at, Mike, is there were things that even though I was 13, 14, 15, 16, I was going, I would do this differently if I were doing this, which is weird, right?
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any background in it.
Well, especially at that age, too, you know.
And so I'm about 15 and a half years old, and I'm sitting on the floor and I'm stretching and I'm looking at a Bruce Lee magazine, and my mom comes over and she says, hey, have you thought about what we're going to do? Like, you know, I alluded to it earlier. And I remember her asking me, are you going to go into the family business? My dad had a clothing import-export manufacturer, ladies' clothing. And it was his dad's business, and it was a big, like, family legacy. And you going to go into the family business, or are you going to be a lawyer or doctor? And I looked up at her on the floor, sitting on the floor. I looked up and I said, Mom, I'm actually not gonna really, school's not gonna be a big thing for me, and I don't know about the family business. I'm actually gonna be I'm gonna be a famous martial artist like Bruce Lee. And I'm gonna develop my own self-defense system. And I look at her and she looks at me and she pat me on the head and went, okay, dear, we'll talk about this when you're older, right?
Fucking dismissed.
Right.
Yeah.
But I just like I knew this is what I was doing.
Yeah.
You know.
For the rest of the time, and from that first time that you got beat up, and then as you're going through high school, did you get in any other fights, or did you ever have to use it? Like, how did those experiences?
Yeah. So I wasn't a tough guy. I didn't go looking for trouble. I look at people who brag about street fights as like, that'd be like a driving instructor bragging about car accidents.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a good
it's
analogy.
Like fuck, you see these ads in the magazine. Study with this guy. He's had 600 street fights, and he'll teach you. And I'm like, take your driving lesson from this guy. He's been in 600 accidents.
Yeah.
Like, and here's the thing about psychologically: if you have a lot of experience winning fights, it's because you're starting fights.
Yeah.
And some people will argue. I'm not talking about like operators. I'm not talking about like a doorman at a shitty club. I'm talking about like the guy in the street, because the way predator and prey interact, prey does not attack a predator, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're looking around for people, you're unconsciously looking for people that will not hospitalize you, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody's going, hey, let's attack that guy. Wait a minute, it looks like he's going to bite your nose off and put us both in the hospital. Oh, okay, let's attack him. Like that's never a conversation. Mm-hmm. So I would always. And I don't know why I would think about these things. When people go, what about this guy? What about this guy? And I go like, self-defense it's not about learning how to fight. It's about learning how to not fight. And understanding how to not fight includes understanding how to protect yourself. My approach was always really, really quite different. So to answer your question, yeah, I had lots of stuff, but I was, morally and ethically and I didn't know it at the time, legally, I had this true, no, I don't want any fucking trouble. And so I had lots of altercations that I had to figure out how to talk my way out of. There were a few confrontations. I remember one in high school. I must have been about 16, because I think I just got my learner's permit for driving, and some kid. There was the school nerd who had the big fat black glasses with the tape on it. That kid, his name was Lance. I can't believe I remember his name. He's in class, and teacher's out of class, and all the kids are running around doing stupid shit. And one of the kids pushes him, and another kid was standing behind him and tripped him, and he falls into the supply closet, and all the kids fucking laugh, and he's embarrassed, like he's like 15 and a half, 16, you fucker, and everyone's laughing, and it's contagious. I'm laughing too, but he stands up. He thinks I was the guy that shoved him or tripped him, so he comes right at me. And I've been training for 3 years religiously, and my instructor Alex said, hey, if I catch you guys using this outside of school and abusing it, not using it, abusing it, you're out, you're done. And this was my life. I dreamed every day is like, okay, what time's class today? So here I am. This guy comes at me, and my hands come up. Like I get this micro flinch. I'm like, dude, whoa, it wasn't me. And this is like now the basis of my system, but I hadn't started teaching yet. Mm-hmm. So I'm still doing Taekwondo, which is like side stance, side kicks, back fist, right? And my hands go finger splayed outside 90, and I'm like, dude, whoa. And I'm pushing away danger. It wasn't me, but he thinks it's me, and he comes at me, and I dart and I move, and now I'm got my back to a wall, and he's in my face, like his carotid. He's furious, and all the kids are laughing. Teacher's still not there, and I hear my instructor Alex saying, "You're out of school. You're out of school." And then there's another part in my other head going, "He's too close to kick. He's too close to kick." My back was to the wall. I couldn't create space because there's no such thing as muscle memory, but the muscle memory of sparring was I needed this kicking range. So picture this shit here, and if it was in this day and age, everyone would be like filming, but everyone's standing around going, fight, fight. It's like just so stupid.
Fucking blood sport.
Yeah. And so he's standing in front of me, and I say to him, dude, it wasn't me. We're not fighting. And he goes, you fucking pussy. He says, I'll let you have the first punch. And I knew, and you've been in situations where you know something's about to happen, right? And it's that sixth sense. I knew that right after he said that, he was going to sucker punch me, because I could see him blade. I could feel his pec. I could see his pec contracting, and his hand was moving, and he was blading. He says, come on, you fucking pussy, I'll let you have the first punch. And I hit him on the letter U of the word punch, right? And I was standing southpaw like this. Dude, I want trouble. And I threw the world's shittiest jab ever. Me and my sister punches harder.
Yeah.
But it was like off balance, and I threw this punch. It hit him. His head went back, and he came like a ricochet right off that. But my hand was still up, and as his punch came around, my hands came up, and I did my first primal flinch, right? And his arm hit my forearm and careened off my forearm, and we bounced into a shitty clinch position. At that point, I grabbed him by the hair. I'd never practiced this shit. Yanked him off balance and turned it into a hip throw. So all my wrestling turned that into a hip throw. I never let go of his hair when he hit the ground. And then I still holding his head, I whipped him into 2 desks. And him hitting the desks like stunned him.
Yeah.
And he's like lying there. And at that point, you know, I do all of this shit, like maybe 6 seconds have gone by. And I'm pointing at him in like a martial arts stance, and I scream, if you get up, I'll fucking kill you. Which I didn't mean. I'm like 16, right?
Yeah.
But I was like so angry because I really didn't want to fight.
Yeah.
And I didn't. And this is the thing also about when I said earlier, violence doesn't care what martial art you study. When violence happens, part of your brain is trying to reconcile, why are people mean? What's going on? I didn't ask for this. Holy fuck, right? And it needs to cycle through that before we can get to intent, right? Until you can go, attack. And so the fight was over. And the fascinating thing for me in deconstructing this is immediately I'm like, I went home and I'm vibrating, I'm adrenalized. And what I did was I looked up boxing. I didn't look up verbal de-escalation. It didn't exist. It didn't look up diffusing confrontations. There was no verbal judo. There was no and what I did immediately is what most people do is when you lose a fight and it's obvious that it happened at a particular range because of a kick or a strike or a weapon, you immediately go to study that thinking that's going to solve the problem. So I went and I studied boxing next. That became, I fell in love with boxing, but it was, I guess what I'm sharing in the story is like how organically, like it wasn't like, okay, here's your internet in a box, here's your, here's the path to become a self-defense instructor, study this, and then in 2 years you get this. It was like an incident would happen and I'd be like, whoa, what the fuck was that? I had another, there was no road rage term back then, accidentally cut somebody off. I was boxed in and I look in my mirror, I'm like doing like one of these things like sorry, and the guy's like, I look back and he's like out of his car charging at my car, and I'm like, and I jumped out of my car and he's coming at me, and it was the first time it was like this asocial anger, like what the fuck's this? And he came at me swinging and my hands came up and I grabbed him and I slammed him against the car. And next thing you know, you're rolling around. It was never like in the dojo where you're like up and down and going break, fight. And it was never sequential. And I'm an overthinker. And I would like just lie there ruminating, like, what the fuck? Where was all my training? How come? That was like, I could have sidekicked the guy there, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Right? What was going on there? And I would meditate on that shit for fucking. Yeah.
Well, so that brings up, my question then, in hearing the I guess we'll tackle the first story of in the school, is that was there any element of the training that you had done in those 3 years that contributed to what you did there? How much of it played a role, do you think, in you being successful there?
It was funny, and I don't say this to go, hey, look at me, look what I did, because I was scared during all this shit. And I tell people now, there's no such thing as no fear, N-O fear, but there is a way to no fear. KNOW fear.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, like, you need to get to know fear to be able to use fear as a fuel.
Right.
If you're afraid of fear, then it becomes this specter in your mind, that just weighs you down and distracts you.
Yeah.
And so it's, how do you cultivate a different relationship with fear? So in all those things, like and I had a few other confrontations where I'd go, how come I didn't use an uppercut? How come I didn't front kick? How come I didn't side kick? So in terms of what, as a consumer, I thought I was buying, the product was faulty.
Yeah. And
you'll see if you Google street fights on YouTube or Google and you watch all these fights, most of them aren't real violent encounters, even though they're violent. They're what I call douchebag fights.
Yeah.
There were lots of opportunities to morally, ethically, legally have people move away, but it was like, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? What are you looking at? Whose penis is bigger? You fucking cut me off. You're talking to my girl. They're douchebag fights. And so you'll see elements of martial art in some of those. But if you watch a truly violent encounter, I'm talking about like somebody getting fucking killed, somebody getting beaten, a violent mugging, a violent rape, a violent home invasion. You don't see martial arts ever.
Yeah, jail stabbings are a good example, like when you see them on their security cameras and shit.
And when you look at, so I've for 40 years I've been studying violence now, but for decades in creating courses for law enforcement and military, I would study CCTV, body cam, helmet cam shit. And I would point out, like, there's one incident that I did a whole AAR on. There was 3 Israeli soldiers in a marketplace triangulating on a guy that was clearly suspicious. That's why they got fucking long guns, body armor, helmets. They're like this. They asked the guy for his documentation. He's like, he stands up. Yeah. He gets it up, but while he gets it out, he gets out a knife, comes up and stabs the soldier in the middle, right in the subclavian artery. And so I'm talking and I'm showing people a video. I go, like, why didn't, like, is Israeli army, how dialed in is his Krav Maga? How dialed in is his, like, that's as close to the homeland as you can get as origin. But what did he do? He didn't use his Krav Maga. Then he stabs this guy and goes to slash the guy to his right. Does he do wax on, wax off? No. Does he kick? Does he punch? No. He fucking flinches. And then he slashes at the other guy. This is happening like in a second and a half, right? Stab, slap, slap. All 3 soldiers who knew there was a bad guy there, who went and said, let me see your papers, still got surprised, didn't intercept his primal gross motor movement with a complex motor skill, right? Mm-hmm. And then how did it end? There were a bunch of other soldiers who saw what was happening, and they introduced this guy to lead poisoning really quickly, and that's what ended up, right? And I look at that and I go, you're trained, you're in the military, you're adept at hand-to-hand combatives, you're looking at the bad guy, you're within arm's reach of the bad guy, you suspect he's a bad guy, you still got stabbed and almost slashed, and then someone else had to come and stop the threat. Yeah. And I look at that and I see that more frequently. In the condition to this, and for everybody listening to this, I'm only trying to make people safer.
Yeah.
Right. It's understanding. Bob Willis, who wrote, I don't know if you ever in your past training and stuff like that, there was an encyclopedic book called The Tactical Edge and Street Survival. They're massive books that are published by Caliber Press. So Bob Willis was one of the authors, and he was watching me teach a seminar in 1993, and I'm talking about all this stuff. And I said, are you training for your next fight? Or are you training for your last fight? Careful what you practice. You might get really good at the wrong thing. And I was trying to create a metacognitive awareness for people, which is really fancy for, do you understand how you think about thinking? Because if you improve your perception speed, you decrease your reaction time, and changing all that changes what you do in sudden violence. So it wasn't that, I'm not trying to stop someone from doing jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, MMA, Krav Maga. There's a micro moment in a sudden ambush where some people get off the X. And getting off the X, I'm not talking about immediate action drills. I'm talking about emotionally getting off, understanding how to convert that in their mind. And I'm articulating in a different way now because I've been studying it for decades. But back then, that's what I was searching for.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know. So something would happen, and I go, why in my mind didn't I see this or do this? Why didn't I? Because this was a very long answer to, did any of your arts contribute to your success or failure? And I jumped ahead to decades later, like these Israeli soldiers, their training failed them.
Yeah.
And so I look at cops, military, people who are hunters moving towards bad guy. I go, this microphone's a bad guy. I should be ready here. And then if the bad guy moves first, and this is just an action-reaction model, they're being fucked by physics.
Yeah. So, I mean, to me, the synopsis of that then is that ultimately no, however, is that it was those real-world experiences that taught you that there needed to be something developed that hinged or leveraged on instinct, reaction, reflex, et cetera, right? I mean,
yeah. So I look at it like this: as studying martial arts was like somebody gave me a toolbox and said, "This is a hammer, this is a saw, this is a screwdriver," and then they taught me how to do stuff.
Yeah,
and they might have taught me how to build simple things that were just abstracts. You're going to build a shelf here. You're gonna screw something in, But so I use this analogy now, like in terms of a more philosophical, real world application. Who knows more about building? A handyman, a carpenter, or an architect? And you go, well, without even knowing the definition, it just sounds like the architect. Isn't he the guy that designed this house, this office, this building? Yeah. And so when we approach studying violence, we approach it like architects. And it starts with understanding the relationship between physiology, physics, and psychology, because that's what I discovered. And that's what I was searching for, is when I had that first fight when I was 15 or 16, I was going, something's wrong here. And I went, and every time I'd be sitting in my bed staring at my ceiling, unable to sleep, going, what the fuck happened there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was searching for. And so that's kind of what we built and it's almost like a type of knowledge-based software you can insert to anyone at any level. They could be MMA fighter, UFC level, to tier 1 guys. It just makes them safer.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's another classic example of necessity is the mother of all invention, right? I guess what I'm really curious about is that at that point, okay, that's your light switch moment, and I know that the short answer is you never stop learning, developing, evolving, et cetera. But how was that process where you figured, okay, now here's the problem, here's my solution to it, and kind of building and when you developed the SPEAR system and kind of how that process took place?
Yeah, so I'm working at my dad's office. It's 1979, 1980, and I'm making $4 an hour. And even though it was a family business, when I got there, the first day of work, I remember I told you about my dad's relationship in mind. First day of work, I'm wearing kind of like, khakis and a button-down shirt. I'm thinking, well, my last name's Blauer. The name of the company is Blauer International. Yeah. And there's going to be an office for me, right? I'll have a secretary, right? And
he's like, what the fuck are you wearing?
We're there, and there's got like 10 people on staff. We're having breakfast together, and he goes, "You what?" And he says, "You ready to get to work?" I go, "Sure, Dad." He goes, "See that over there?" And I turn my head, and he goes, "Against the wall." I'm like looking, the broom, like right in front of everybody. I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Start by sweeping out the shipping area."
Yeah.
And I said to myself, "You fucking dick!" Like you could have told me this before, because I grew up with these people.
Yeah.
Right.
So you knew all the.
I was a toddler running around the office, right? And, it's my dad's company.
Yeah.
So I started off sweeping the back, and when we would get big boxes in from overseas with clothing, and they were like these massive, thick boxes, and this is like years before Rocky.
Yeah.
But I would, like Rocky would punch meat. I'd be punching the box because they were fucking huge.
Yeah.
And you could nail into them, and if you really clipped it, your knuckle would penetrate. Super strong. And So one day I'm like freaking doing jump back kicks and kicking they're kicking the shit out of a box. And I turn around and one of my dad's good friends and best client, Joey, is standing there and he says, hey, you're getting pretty good at this stuff. I go, thanks, Joey. I've been like training nonstop for years. He goes, and I knew his kids. He goes, Mitchie's having some trouble at school, some bully trouble. He says, I want you to teach him. I say, sure. He goes, do you teach? I go, I got one guy I work out with, but he goes, okay, how much do you charge? I go, well, I'm not going to charge you. You're like a friend of the family. He goes, no, I want you to take this seriously. And I want you on time. I want the lesson plan. This is Mitchie, right? My boy, he's 15. And we didn't know back then what, that type of abuse can do to some people.
Yeah.
And so he looks at me, he goes, how's 20? So I'm not that good at math, but I'm thinking that must be for 5 lessons because I'm making $4 an hour. So I go, like, I don't want your money, but okay. He goes, so I'll pay you $20 for every class. And when he says that, I'm like, holy fuck. I actually said, Mike, to myself, oh my God, I'm rich. And I mean, I haven't even taught one class yet, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, oh my God. So I go there and I start training Mitch. And 2 things happen. One is, and they were obviously, wealthy family in a wealthy neighborhood. And I say obviously, I don't know why I said that, sounds obnoxious, but he's just like paying this guy, here's $20 for a lesson to a 19-year-old in 1980. Mm-hmm. And so his brother Steve says to his mom and dad, how come Mitch gets lessons? I want lessons. Okay. Well, like within a week, I had 2 students. We're working out? Backyard's garage, right? There's no gym. Derek across the street, what are you guys doing? Like, I'm not shitting you. Within a month, I had 30 private students.
God damn.
So I was making, and I charged everyone $20. That was the number. All of a sudden, I was making $600 a week, plus working my dad. So I'd work 40 hours a week there, and then every night and all weekend. So I was just like nonstop. So I did my 10,000 hours about 3 times.
Yeah.
And but what I was doing was unconsciously, these were my guinea pigs. I was trying to create drills that helped me answer the fears that I had. And about 3 months into training Mitch, he's asking me questions. Oh, I love sharing this part because he says to me one day, he's like, Coach, this guy's really getting on my nerves. I go, Mitch, has he touched you yet? No, school's not doing anything, right? They're like going, you guys work it out, like, because there was no physical. Mm-hmm. So I go, he goes, man, I know we're going to fight. I said, okay, well, maybe you are. But even back then, as young as I was, testosterone, I still had a moral imperative. I still would say, no retroactive violence. You're not sucker punching anybody. That's fucking bullshit. Mm-hmm. But if he touches you, you're going to protect yourself, Mitch. Okay? He's like, okay. I go, let me ask you another question. I said, how do you feel with your striking? Because at the time, I was teaching Taekwondo, boxing, and wrestling, right? So this is like 1980. And for the timeline, first UFC was 1993. So this was like an intuitive precursor to MMA. And I wasn't the only one doing it. Kaju Kempo was blending shit. There are lots of people doing that stuff. Bruce Lee was blending it, right? So Mitchell says to me, I said, Mitch, do you think you could punch somebody really hard? He goes, not really. I said, what about your slipping, your bobbing, weaving, your parrying? How good are you at that? He says, not too good. I said, well, if you can't punch and you can't block, I suggest you don't get into a fight, right? But what I'm trying to share with you is like everything was very mechanical.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I need this gun. Oh, I need this compass. Oh, it was all about the kit and not about the warrior, the mindset, right? Yeah. And so 3 months later, I come in for his private lesson and he's sitting in his room like this, just furious. I knew something had happened, didn't know what. So I said, what happened? And he jumps up, he goes, motherfucker, he's like, I go, dude, tell me what happened. He goes, I'm late for class, I'm running in the back of the school, he's there with his gang, and he sees me running on the corner, I don't see him, and he sticks his foot out and trips me in front of a bunch of students. I go flying, and these are like 15-year-old kids, right? I go flying, my books go flying, pick him up, and I'm muttering under my breath, you fucking asshole, you piece of shit. And it was the first time Mitch had asserted. And he goes, he says, the guy walks up to me, goes, what did you fucking say? And Mitch goes, what's your fucking problem, man? You fucking been bugging me at school. I didn't fucking know you. Like, just leave me the fuck alone. And the guy goes, what are you going to do about it? And I told Mitch, if he touches you, it's on. Don't let people. But this was one kind of these weird things. It's like he poked me. It wasn't like he hit me or stuck a sweat. So Mitch grabs him, slams him against a locker bank, and says, "Don't fucking put your hands on me." And he stops the story there. He just looks at me. He says, and I grabbed him, slammed him against the locker bank, and I said, "Don't put your fucking hands on me." And I go, and he goes, "He dropped me." I go, "What do you mean he dropped you?" Because he hit me with a left, and I next thing I was on the ground looking up. And I was like, dude, like, why didn't you slip? Why didn't you parry? Why didn't you do anything? And he goes like this, Mike. He goes, well, I was holding him with my left hand, and I had my books in my right hand. And in that moment, and I've been telling this story for decades now, that was the moment that everything changed for me in self-defense. It was like the god of self-defense hit me with a lightning bolt. And I said to myself, we teach self-defense wrong. There was no context, there was no scenario, there was no discussion about emotional, there was, like, you think about, like, you've been trained how to get out of a headlock, right? Where does that training start? With you in a headlock. So you do 10,000 reps of getting out of a headlock to have mastery of getting out of a headlock, but you don't realize that you've done 10,001 reps practicing letting somebody put a headlock on you.
Yeah.
And that changes your reaction time and in your case, because you've had real world situational awareness experience, so like on the job shit, that changes for you. So you augmenting what you know from real world deployment and training, inserting the jiu-jitsu is amazing. That's like saying, hey, should we have another magazine with us? No, less bullets is good. Like, it's just, it's more shit for you to do because you've already cultivated the intent.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In the real world, most of us don't develop situational awareness or intent. And so we, instead of learning about the architect and the mental blueprints of violence, we just buy the toolbox.
It's really interesting as you're talking about that being that moment of clarity and almost a self-defense epiphany, is that I've come to a similar conclusion in dog training, and bear with me for a second just because a lot of the listeners are big dog fans, which is why they tune in. But I view a very similar thing with a lot of dog training out there and behavioral issues, is that, it's a slippery floor that the dog is paranoid of or, scared to death of. It's that other fucking intact male that's looking at him fucking cockeyed and now he wants to lose his shit. He wants to chase squirrels. Fill in the fucking blank of whatever it is that it's the exact same thing with dog training, is that, okay, the dog hates other dogs. Let's put him around another dog and teach him to fucking, at that point now you're just cranking on him and making him so averse to that other dog that you're just, crucifying him basically. Right. Is that, I take that similar approach, in that it's not about the other fucking dog. It's that he's not paying attention to me when I want him to, no matter what the fuck is going on. Right. And so instead of putting him at level 12 out of 10 and then trying to address it there where you can't reach the fucking dog's mind, and with dogs it's even more so because you can't explain any of this to them, is that I'm going to spend hours, days, weeks, months, hundreds if not thousands of hours of just reinforcing and shaping him to look at me. Every fucking time his eyes make contact with mine, I'm going to mark it and reward it. And then I'm going to start to flood distractions and add more and more challenging things. But we've done it so many times that now the dog gets to where the doorbell rings, let me look at him. There's another dog, let me look at him. There's a fucking kid on a bike flying by, let me look at, and that becomes their default reaction to every fucking thing, is let me look at him, because good shit happens every time I do it when something comes into play. So that's the first thing I think of, is because there's a huge parallel there, and that just like a lot of other self-defense or martial arts type of folks, they kind of can't see the forest for the trees in that similar fashion. But it's interesting. I have never thought of it that way in the way that you just phrased it, especially in the context of you've just, basically taught yourself how to get, in a headlock 10,000 times. And because that same thing is true with dogs when you use compulsion, and not to get too far off in the weeds, but again, the dog reference is, if a dog is biting somebody and you teach them through force to let go, is that, you got the dog to let go, but you've also taught him how to lose. Over and over and over, you've taught the dog that he can be physically manipulated off of a bite. And so now you get some tweaker that grabs the dog's collar and stabs him with a fucking screwdriver or whatever. And now you've got a dog letting go because he's used to that being his button to push to fucking let go, whether it's choking, e-collar, flanking, coming off strong, fucking whatever. Is that I want to do the exact opposite, is teach him that no matter what happens, you stay on that fucking bite. But anyway.
But it's interesting to look at things in terms of, because it's easy for all of us to go, oh, I want that, and we don't think about the process, and we don't think about the behavior, and we don't think about the scenario, and so in that moment when I said we teach self-defense wrong, I looked at Mitch and I said, dude, are those your books? He goes, yeah. I go, grab them and grab me. And this is going to connect to like your dog epiphany is, I said, grab me like you grabbed him. And he's like, what? You would think like in Mitch's mind, we were going to go do pad work.
Yeah.
Right. No, we're going to replicate this. I need to understand what happened. And he looks at me, he goes, hey man, I'm sorry I lost. And I go, no, I'm sorry. I didn't teach you correctly. I actually apologized to him. Right. Which is, I did, we didn't have the term social experiment back then, but I called like 3 martial art buddies of mine, told them the story. And I said, hey, if this happened to one of your students, how would you address this? And they all criticized the student. Well, why'd you compromise your hands? And I'm thinking, because you're fucking 15 and you're in school.
Yeah.
Like you've got, like every fight you use your hands. You're separating somebody, you're pulling someone out of a vehicle, you got your hands on your weapon, it's like, you don't compromise your hands. Like we have these like idealistic, like dojo laboratory rules, right? A couple other guys, why do you get so close? He shouldn't have done. And I'm like, wow. And I knew those answers were wrong. I didn't have the clarity that I have now, like decades later, of like refining a process. But it was, I apologized to him and then reverse engineered the scenario, because I didn't want to say to him, and this goes back to the dog thing of like going, no, if the skill we need you to have right here is to stop this threat and not let go, then introducing other behaviors that teach you, but sometimes you let go. Changes things that were in our wiring, in our understanding. And so I never said to Mitchell, you shouldn't have been that close. I never said to him, don't grab him. What I did say is, look, you'll probably grab someone in anger again. And what we did is we actually grabbed, and I actually said to him, if you're going to grab somebody with your left hand, you'll always grab their right shoulder. You'll always grab their left side. And get your if this is the chest here, you'll grab the left side so your forearm lays. And then I hadn't developed the spear yet, which is finger splayed outside 90. How to use your forearm like a crowbar. And because what had happened was, I said, if you grab center, he can throw a right or a left because he'll just rotate around the axis. If you grab right and he throws the left hook, when you push away, when he flinched, you're actually going to create more torque. And if he jams here, he'll throw right. His body will intuitively follow the path of least resistance. I mean, look, this is happening like 15 minutes after with this 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Debriefing at this level, showing him, and then replicating and do it again. But what I did there, and it was just intuitive, is I erased the potential PTSD or whatever you want to call it, of there was like this negative scar of, oh, I get beaten up at school when I have a backpack and I grab somebody. It was like, if I ever grab somebody again, I'm going to know where to grab them. I'm going to have all of these sensory, tactile cues, right? And so we were being an architecture or an architect and studying architecture of a violent encounter that involved, 2 15-year-olds in a school bag.
Yeah.
And we then built in the physical movements from there, right? So, okay, this happens, you pushed away, the punch comes up, it jams that, you need to drop your bag here, now you're going to come in here, here's a headbutt, here's a punch, So what we did is, so Bob Willis, I was mentioning in 1993, saw me teaching, and he said, "Holy shit, you're teaching the 3 seconds before the fight everyone else teaches."
Yeah.
And it was interesting, like, oh, here's a headbutt, here's an uppercut, here's a bite, here's an eye gouge. And I was going, here's you fucking freaking out, weathering the ambush, hitting a point of domination in your mind, remembering your intent, and now making contact. And in studying violence, I realized like that was the piece that a lot of people never got and didn't make it through their fight.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like with that, obviously that light switch moment that you had, and now that was your first lesson in terms of, you know, figuring out how to integrate real world scenarios into your training. How did Spear, talk to us about, you know, what it is, you know, and from there, how it was developed and kind of that whole process.
Yeah. So and that was 1980. And like literally that day forward, I had a bunch of plans to relocate to California and go and study with some, you know, reality-based legends. And I was like, okay, no, I have this. I know exactly what my path is. I knew what I had to do. And I started teaching, and every month we would hold a seminar where we would practice role playing, and we would look at the news and look at a story of a violent attack and then draw inspiration from that. And we were using like Kyokushinkai karate had these knockout tournaments. I bought they had these plexiglass helmets.
Yeah.
So I had a bunch of those at the school. We had like Taekwondo bamboo chest guards, hockey shin guards. It was like Frankenstein equipment, right? And so that was the precursor to developing high gear like a decade later. And so we'd fight with hockey gloves on, and we'd just beat the shit out of each other like once a month on a weekend, 6-on-1s, 4-on-2s. We would look at, and word of this got around. And so we started having people like different martial artists and street fighters and people come in, and it was this real crazy, I'm going to say underground because it was literally the basement. Yeah. That was a basement school, so we were sort of underground. But what I did is I would say, for example, I go, "Hey, Mike, great, thanks for coming in. Hey, so I want to know what your go-to, what your favorite moves are. And, you know, if you go, I love headbutting people, or I like my overhand right is my go-to move." And people would write down. So I'd say to them, if somebody was doing this, what do you think you would do? And so I would kind of like survey the group, and then we'd write this down. And then what I would do, and it was automatic, it was very quick. And we have a maxim in our scenario training: never make your partner look good, but never make him look bad. Mm-hmm. So you don't want it to be too easy, and you don't want to,
embarrass them.
Yeah. And so I would immediately, and everyone would role play each other. Even when I work with tier 1 teams that want to hire OPFOR, that's opposing force for people who don't know. And so
for you civilian assholes.
Yeah, for you guys that don't know what OPFOR means. So I would never let guys do that. They go, no, we'll bring guys in. I go, no. We opt for each other. No, it's too dangerous. No. What's dangerous is not doing it. And I would tell people there's 2 reasons. One is if you know what the process is and you can't stop it, how fucking cool is that?
Yeah.
You know what your buddy's going to try and do. And if you can't stop it, does that change your confidence? Mm-hmm. Fuck yeah. Also, when you're opt for, you can see what the bad guy sees. So that's going to create a different light bulb in your debriefs of like, hey, what if this? It's going to create more Murphy discussion, and that makes you safer. Yeah. So that was really, really cool paradigm shift for a lot of the guys that would do that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like, about the best way you can learn in that type of environment. Was it at that time where you kind of coined the spear term, or?
Well, the spear was actually there's a connection to naval special warfare and the SEALs, and kind of cool that I'm talking to you about this. But years went by with me doing these scenarios, and in the late 80s, like 10 years went by. So my 10,000 hours times 2 or 3, and 10 years. And I like just doing scenario, but we never wore uniforms. We never did bowing. Everyone like, you showed up in class in torn sweatshirt and a torn T-shirt, and we just trained.
Did you call it anything at that point?
Yeah, I actually had a funny name. Back in the 80s, you had to have an Oriental name, like nobody like, right? Yeah. And so I remember, having this Chinese reader, and I was looking for names that sounded like martial arts.
Yeah.
And I picked the name Chu Fen, Chufen, Chu Fen Do, the way of. And Chu Fen meant the way of punishment.
Yeah.
And I got asked about that in 1980. I was, Black Belt Magazine did an article on me. And here's a great example. I wrote a letter, there's no email back then. I wrote a letter to the editor of Black Belt Magazine saying, hey, I'm Canadian, I do this. I was inspired by Bruce Lee, but we're doing stuff differently. And so he calls me up and says, hey, if you can get to California, we'll feature you. So I go there. I threw up on the way to the interview, right? So remember I talked about fear?
Yeah.
I'm like, why would I throw up? I was so nervous about, like, am I really doing something important? Am I really worth being in here? And like on the way in, like I parked my car and Chuck Norris is walking out, literally Chuck Norris. and he didn't know at the time that years later I'd be drinking his tears, but that's life, Chuck. And so, but 10 years went by where we did hundreds and hundreds of these scenarios. Around 1987, 88, and I was always surgically analyzing things, right? And I think you can tell by now, I'm very introspective. I deeply think about stuff. So I never wanted my students to just do things because I said so. Yeah. Just do this. So one night I hallucinated this drill, and I was always trying to figure out how close is too close? When do I lose reaction time? Like what? How do I control distance? Proximity sense is everything, right? So you could have a Barrett and you're standing, and I'm just standing like an inch away from the range of that. I could be doing this, hey Mike, and you can fire, and the bullet will drop like in the Matrix, like, right? Yeah. So I'm exaggerating to make a point. Proximity sense is everything. You got to know the distance to your weapon. You got to know the target. And so, but that's very mechanical. And so I do these experiments. And so one day I hallucinated this drill but everything was always, martial. And I said, well, and this became this expression, like all fights are dangerous, but the most dangerous fight is the ambush, because there's no consent, there's no awareness, there's no preparation. And your physiological system will get hijacked in a true ambush. And so we needed something there. So this was actually the event that gave birth to that language. Warren was one of my top students who went on to teach for me, but he was really gifted striker, boxing, loved boxing. So he comes in one day for a private lesson. I go, hey man, I'm derailing your private lesson. I need you to do this drill with me. And I need you to hit me as hard as you can whenever you want in the context of this drill. And he goes, what? I go, you're gonna put on 16-ounce gloves, I'm gonna wear a mouth guard. I said, all of our drills, with the exception of when we do these monthly scenarios, which involved dialogue. It might be like in the scenario, it wasn't like just us sparring. It would be, Mike, you're outside at a bus stop. Two guys are going to come up to you and ask you some questions, see what happens. Like that's as far, but I would know, let's say I knew that you loved shin kicks, because I looked at your index card when I interviewed you. I go, Mike, you're at a bus stop. These two guys are going to come up to you. And you're like, okay, but you're wearing gear, so you're going to get in a fight, right? So we've taken away the element of surprise. So I would always add a little twist. I go, Mike, and you're sitting down at the bus stop. And you'd be like, fuck. And you'd see him go, fuck, like, how am I going to kick? Because no one practices shin kicking while they're seated. Yeah. And now it would evolve from there, and you would just see people, and we ended up, Panther Productions, one of the biggest, I don't think they're around anymore. I think they were bought by Century years ago. But they were the biggest martial art instructional company in the world. They released in 1986 a series called The Panic Attack, which was the name of my seminar. It actually became like world renowned because of that. And it was, so here I am just fast forwarding those scenarios were already in place, but I was always trying to surgically get deeper and deeper into the brain, into the mind, into response and reaction time, and understanding how do we make decisions under duress. So I said to Warren, you're going to stand in front of me and you're going to say whatever you want at any range, any distance. And we had at the time cameras like, remember, I don't know if you remember the old VHS RCA, right? That was that. So we're filming this. And I said to Warren, I said, you can talk to me. You can say, hey, and we're underground. We're in the school in the basement. You could say to me, can't believe it's going to rain. And I will look up and go, well, my uncle's a farmer and he'll be happy. It's like, I won't go, you're trying to sucker punch me, even though I know you're trying to sucker punch me. I will override that. I go, because we are most vulnerable when we have been behaviorally distracted by some sort of congruent, language from a real scientific predator. And he says, okay. So he puts on the gloves and he goes, so you're not going to hit me? I go, no. I got a mouth guard on. I just want to see, I'm just filming. I want to see what's going to happen here. And he goes, so I hit you and you don't hit me. And as he said that, my heart started pounding. I got this wicked adrenaline dump, and I realized, I don't think this drill's going to go quite the way I had anticipated. Because part of my athletic ego was I was going to fucking zig and zag and do some shit and then watch the film and figure some stuff out. The first question he asks me, and I know my wife won't watch this, but and Warren won't watch this, but I don't know if I should say that. How many women watch this show?
I mean, a fair bit.
So I don't know if I should say.
I think you should.
Okay.
In true mic drop fashion,
right.
You got to
right.
go for it.
So Warren had two really cute sisters who both had crushes on me, and I wasn't seeing anyone at the time, and so I might have had intimate experiences with both of them.
Yeah.
And I don't think they both knew. And I for sure, and Warren, I'd been teaching him for years. I was a friend of the family. It was awkward, right? And they, sometimes they'd come into the school I'm here to pick up Warren. I go, yeah, but you're in my office now with the door closed. So you need to, right? And so this was his first question, Mike. And we had never talked about this. He looks at me, he goes, I go, yeah. He goes, what's going on with you and my sister? and I swear to God, because he said sister singular, I didn't know if he was, because I was...
Tell me you didn't say which one.
Well, I was trying to figure out if this was part of the drill or if he had just manifested the courage to ask me.
Yeah.
Right? Because he was also... He was into acting. He was an art student. So so he was like, what's going on with you and my sister? And I'm thinking, does he fucking know? Because he didn't say sisters. And it would be, if he knew, it would be both. Yeah. And while he says that, while I'm thinking that, he goes, wham, and he fucking hits me with an uppercut. Yeah. Turned me into a Pez dispenser. My fucking head snapped back, rocks back. And then he looks at me and goes, is that the drill? And I'm like, I'm fucking rocked back, right? And I'm like, whoa. I never said anything, and we never spoke about it, so I don't even know if he knows. But for the next hour, the next hour, I got my head punched in. At the end of the session, I had a mouse under both eyes. My lips were fat. I was bleeding from my mouth. I had a massive headache. But here was what happened. Pain being the mother of invention, as is necessity, but pain very quickly. My body, when it would start to hit, would start to flinch. Well, in the first, very quickly, I created an adaptation for a single shot. So I'd see him move and I'd be able to jam it, but I really thought I was going to wax on, wax off him. I thought I was going to parry, slip, bong sao, tan sao. But too close was too close. He'd walk in, he'd say something like, hey, the boss wants his money. And I wouldn't blade and go, tell the boss I need another week. I stayed in character because I was really filming to try and study human movement. Yeah. So he'd say, I remember when the boss wants his money, and I go, man, I'm good for the whack. He'd fucking hit me, right? And and then I said, okay, you can now go to 2 punches, 3 punches, because one was getting boring. I was able to track the first shot, the first pre-contact cue, and then I started to move away from the shot. So every time, at the first shot almost hit me, the next one certainly did, because I was moving into skeet shooting range. Mm-hmm. They could actually just see me. Very quickly, because I was getting hit, I started moving towards him, which was counterintuitive. So if you poke a single cell amoeba under a microscope, it pops away from the pinprick. So at a cellular level, we move away from pain, right? Bomb goes off, we do this. We don't go, what? We don't turn towards it. Someone points a gun at you, you flinch from it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I very quickly started attacking his attack by weathering the first one and then diving in and grabbing him. And then he would struggle and I'd hold him, you know, tight. Okay. And that's the end of that. That was good. Okay, push him off, take a breath. We'd reset again. What started to happen was every time I flinched, his fist would hit a hand, a forearm, an elbow, shoulder. When I tried to, like, because I was still wrestling with old muscle memory, which doesn't exist, and that was another learning curve, is I'd still be standing there and he'd go, hey man, you got any money? You know, I haven't eaten in a couple of days. I could really, and I go, sorry dude, I got no money. And then I'd see the lunch and I would try to do some martial move, but because he wasn't coming at me from a traditional movement, my brain didn't have radar lock on it, right? And so after the session, I'm sitting there at my desk, got an ice pack on my face, pop some Tylenol, and I'm thinking, and all that's playing through my mind is every time I flinch, the speed of the flinch, the reliability of the flinch. And I just started experimenting with that. It was like 87, 88. Then I noticed that if somebody went and kind of like did some sort of like furtive gesture or fake, that because I was experimenting it, my hands would shoot up to this. And one day I saw that this position here, that the shape of the hands organically took, was the shape of a spearhead. And then if somebody was too slow on their move, I would jam them, I would rush towards them, like a false start, like in a track race. Mm-hmm. So I'd be getting ready to do a move, and they're worrying about getting hit by me, and I'd false start and wham and slam. And a couple of times on a haymaker, I remember my elbow catching a guy in the bicep, and him fucking dropping down, going, fuck my arm. Another time hitting the radial nerve, you know, as that punch would come in, whack, that would slam, I'd come up. One time I miscued and went over the guy's shoulder, and my forearm hit the guy across the sternum and the brachial and stunned him. I started going, holy fuck. Like, and that became the spear as an icon. That what I would tell people is, you have a nonviolent posture to talk things down, that when it looked like the guy was going to get ready and it couldn't be diffused, it was telescopically extended. And then as it started to happen, as counterintuitive as this was, micro flinch and then charge that threat. That if you got as close to the threat as possible, you had a bigger target and you caught somebody before that elliptical arc of the classic haymaker, even a headbutt, even a tackle or a grab.
Yeah.
And so we started doing reps after reps of that. And it was just called the spear. And people will go, I would say, be the spear. You're the tip of the spear. Yeah. You fucking got to charge the threat. So we did that for years. 1993, so there's no acronym. 1993, I am trying to launch my high gear. I developed the high gear suit a couple of years earlier. And I was showing it to LAPD. And I just read an article that they were cross-training with the SEALs. And I'd actually just done a presentation for Team 4 at Little Creek. And I said, and it was just when combatives was switching from bi-coastal to the West Coast. And so they were all excited about it, but they said, hey, you got to go through the West Coast now. It's because all combatives are being taught out there. I was like, fuck, okay, great. You didn't have a point of contact there. So I had a contact, I don't know, do you remember the name Mike Jaco?
Oh, yeah.
So Mike
he was at Team 3 in training cell when I was there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good guy.
Yeah.
And so he was my point of contact. So I had a name. I called him. He said, yeah, if you're ever out here, you know, like hit me up. So I trying to figure out a way to get like a more official invite and do something. So I had a prototype for my gear. I called up the LAPD, their training division, and I said, hey, I'm going to be out in Coronado showing Naval Special Warfare my high gear. Would you like to see it while I'm out there? And they're like, yeah, you showing it to the teams? I said, yeah. I said, yeah, well, I said, well, what day is good for you? And they're like, you know, how's Tuesday? Or what, they just picked a day, right? And then I called the guys up and I said, hey.
Mom and pop.
Yeah. I said, hey, I'm coming out to LA to show LAPD my gear. Would you like to see it? oh, LA's looking at it, because they had started doing some cross training. And so those guys was my first order for high gear. So they kickstarted my high gear, but in explaining the gear and prototyping, like showing them the prototype and how it worked, a bunch of demos of the whole spear system and the whole methodology started.
Yeah.
And they were, we did some gun disarm demos and some multiple cell and shit. They became really interested, and they set up a training contract with me. We did 2 40-hour sessions almost back to back. Did a lot of really cool, Mike Ferguson, Troy Lane, Jim Worthington. I don't remember any of those names, but
well, 2 of them sound familiar, but
yeah. It was an amazing time, 1993. Yeah. And I actually, my first meeting with Mike, I probably shouldn't say this, but too late, you're going to taunt me anyhow. But I was down at the Hotel Del, and my meeting was the next day, and I was just doing a little reconnaissance of the place, and I decided I'm going to go for a run on the beach. So I start running, and then I see the signs, and I wonder if I could run on to the base. And
fuck yeah, you can back then.
Yeah,
you walk right.
And I did.
Yeah.
And there was like, all these buds instructors and guys in the surf, and they're like looking at me, and I'm clearly not wearing the right shit, but I was, okay, just look confident, and like, you know where you're going. And I ran right into one of the buildings. I was scared shitless. My heart was pounding. But it was back then you could.
Yeah, it's crazy. Back then, I mean, yeah, you could. There wasn't even a fucking gate guard on that side of the base at night. Like you could drive right. Anybody could just drive right the fuck on. It was nuts. But
so I never finished. So with SPEAR became an acronym. I'm teaching the SEALs, and I would always write SPEAR in capital letters because I was like, this is our big move. It became we had 2 stances: a nonviolent posture, morally, ethically, legally diffuse the fight, and then when push came to shove, that stance came up.
Yeah.
Right. And then we would just shoot in, and so they said, "What is?" I'm showing to them, and they fucking loved it.
What's
right?
that stand for?
And this is the back in the day of MP5s, right?
Yeah.
So they were like going, I'd go, this is our stance. They go, MP5, air MP5. Like, I'm from Canada, I don't know what an MP5 is.
Yeah.
I'm going like MP5, yeah. Like this is because they would do. Okay, guys, we'll do.
Yeah.
But and it became so beautiful because my empty hand platform. I don't know if you know Musashi, Japan's great swordsman. He said, make your everyday stance your fighting stance, make your fighting stance your everyday stance. And so when I would go from here to here, that transition from whether it was empty hand to a pistol to a long gun, the kinetic chain of the structure was so congruent. It was like such a natural transition. They loved it.
Yeah.
But they said to me, what does SPEAR mean? I go, it's spear. It's a tip of the spear. Yeah. They go, oh, we thought it was an acronym. So I was teaching in Normandy a week after the course, and I'm sitting there waiting for my class to start, and I'm going, yeah, it would be cool if SPEAR was an acronym. And I literally wrote out on a whiteboard, waiting for my lesson to start, SPEAR. And I'd already been, because of in the late 80s, when I was looking at the startle flinch, I would always say spontaneous protection, that your flinch is going to get your hands moving towards the threat. Now we need to train. This is the behavioral. This is like the Pavlov's dog, classical conditioning. Instead of flinching and pushing away, we flinch and recoil and move towards the threat. I say get spontaneous protection, and then we're gonna fuck the guy up. And so, so my first acronym was actually spontaneous.
So now it's SPORF.
Most people don't know this, because the acronym now, if people are like researching, is spontaneous protection enabling accelerated response. But the original one that I called the SEALs up with, literally called them like that next day. I said, hey, get a pen, you ready? Here's your acronym: spontaneous protection enabling aggressive retaliation. Yeah. And they went, fuck yeah. And I started, that became SPEAR was aggressive, because the idea was, hey man, I don't want trouble, get on the ground, fuck, and then you would nail them. And I philosophically said, like, we never start fights, we just end them. So it is aggressive retaliation, just in terms of like linear logic. Yeah. But then the law enforcement community discovered my stuff about a year after.
And it needs to be a more legally
they're too litigious. Jesus. And they were like, yeah, we can't have aggressive retaliation. Yeah. And so I actually had a department that I was training call me up, and they said they're legal, can't call it SPEAR. They're changing the name. Imagine someone calling you up and saying, hey, we're changing the name of your daughter.
Yeah.
Like, I was furious.
Yeah.
But I cooled down pretty quickly, and I said, well, if nobody's going to look at it because the name is freaking certain people out, then I got to change it. But the current acronym now is psychologically and scientifically more accurate, and it's a better name.
Yeah. For the listener, the current one is what again?
Spontaneous protection, enabling accelerated response.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is, so forensically, if someone goes through a car windshield without a seatbelt on, there is always trauma on their hands. So no one goes through the windshield like this. It's always like this.
Yeah.
And so in every knife fight of a frontal attack, there's always trauma on the hands and the forearm.
Yeah.
In every gunfight, if somebody is unarmed or their gun becomes inoperable and then they're shot, there's always some sort of bullet hole. And so we have all this forensics evidence where I looked at that as going, oh, look how fast the startle flinches. How fast you hit a tree at 90 and there's still trauma on your hands. There's a part of your survival system that's bypassing wax on, wax off.
Yeah.
Imagine in a car, and I call it the biological airbag, that your startle flinch, if you go, hey, what's that? And I don't have time to go, hey, nervous system, you need your survival reflex to do this weird movement, right? So flinching happens. So the system that we've created is kind of like a classical conditioning where we're getting our cognitive brain to respect and integrate what the reptilian brain is going to do anyhow. And then attach that to the complex motor skill. Spear becomes a bridge to your next move. So the spontaneous protection is startle flinch. Any stimulus gets introduced too quickly. So if I suddenly whipped this around and stood up really quick, your first reaction would be, fuck, right? But then you'd be thinking, hey, do I have a gun under the desk? Do I have a knife over here? Are we really going to fight? What's an improvised weapon? Your brain, but you can't get to that, what is my plan B?
Yeah.
Until you weather that initial.
Yeah. So hearing that makes me think of a question, kind of almost from the opposite viewpoint, is that have you worked with any groups or individuals where, because of the nature of the training that they've been doing, that they've actually almost circumvented or at least deadened or at a minimum kind of slowed down that response? And the reason I ask is that, again, thinking of it from a dog perspective, is that one of the things that I found myself curiously impressed by really good decoys, the guys in bite suits, was their ability to have dogs who are unquestionably moving faster than humans by a lot,
right,
with their mouth, is getting, clacking of the jaws literally fucking 3 millimeters from their face, just, where you can hear it. And right, anybody who's been in a suit knows the amount of damage those motherfuckers can do in a short amount of time. Having the ability to stunt that. Now, granted, it's in a certain context, but what I will say is that being a dog guy is that, outside of being in a suit and knowing the dog is coming, just dealing with these dogs, the 20 fucking warrior dogs that are ass eaters, there are times where you're not expecting them to come at you or right, whatever. And one of the things I've noticed with a lot of dog folks and good decoys is they do have a much more stifled reaction system in a lot of ways that way. I'm curious, one is that, have you ever run into that? And two is, would training, in the system that you're talking about, have the ability to fix that?
Right. So, great question. The goal of the training is never to eliminate the startle flinch, because I don't believe it can be, because it's part of our DNA. It's I joke around, I go, 80,000 years ago, there was no caveman kung fu. There's no caveman karate. If you were out hunting and a giant wolf or saber-tooth tiger attacked you, you didn't, get in a stance and do some shit, right? Yeah. So, the startle flinch, this was like, three of us went out and only two of us come back, and caveman wife says, where's Bill? And Bill was slower than Mike and I. What was the last thing he said? I think it was like, and he was in this position just as this saber-tooth tiger ate him. Mm-hmm. And then what happened, and I'll get to your question, but I'm giving like my pretend history evolution here, is, someone went, okay, we're getting attacked by these man-eaters, so the first weapon was probably a big rock, which you ran out of artillery really quick, and you're very inaccurate, right? And so then somebody sharpened a piece of wood, right? And that became the first real weapon, was a spear. The kinetic chain of a spear is the same kinetic chain that we're using. But I'm thinking, here I am with my spear in front of a giant bear. And all I'm thinking is, I fucking hope this thing doesn't snap.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? And so in the moment when the bear attacks, there's a microflinch where your body braces. So you come through a door, and I've had this talk with I've interviewed people who've been ambushed. I've been interviewed people, in real world CQB shit where we're talking and looking stuff. And a lot of stuff is they're in there, they're tracking, and then there's the guy, and it's like, there's a micro flinch before they orient on the threat. And then, so it's never that the flinch was ever gone. It was imperceptible to somebody who didn't know what they were looking at.
Yeah.
And so if there's a term in scenario-based training called stress inoculation, and that's an adaptation. If you said to one of your guys in a suit going, hey, we're going to work with so-and-so today, and he was like, okay, and he's getting out of his car, putting his shit, and you went, dude, fuck, look out. His first reaction is going to be a microflinch. If there was a dog coming at him, his brain is now downloading all the shit he knows he needs to do. Remember Steve Irwin? Mm-hmm. Right? How did he die?
Yeah, the stingray, right? Or manta ray, whatever.
Right. He knew not to pull it out, but what did he do? He was the most experienced guy, hanging out with friggin' the most dangerous spiders and snakes in the world and shit like that. But in that moment, something bypassed his prefrontal cortex, and he said, I got to get this out of me, knowing that's probably going to kill him. So humbly, the education is just about, the more we understand about the nervous system, physiology, physics, fear management, the safer we become. The goal isn't ever, you train with me, I give you a diploma, you have no fear, and you never flinch. The idea is that if you feel fear, you'll recognize it and use it as a fuel. Mm-hmm. And if you flinch, you'll recognize it and convert it as quickly as you can. So somebody untrained might flinch like this, and they're doing that, and the dog's coming at them. Your guy micro flinches and then immediately grabs a piece of the suit and starts to wrap his arm as the dog's coming, going, okay, he's going to go for that. I hope this works.
Yeah.
Right? So it's an adaptation.
Yeah.
I've never met anybody who wasn't asocial that didn't flinch.
Yeah.
Asocial meaning like
just lights
this guy
out.
really shouldn't be out on the streets.
Yeah, fucking bad wiring.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And it's interesting because the subtlety there, again, in paralleling and dog training is generally that's the same type of, I would say, difference that an experienced dog man is in respect to the rest of the population, is that there are micro everythings that dogs do that an experienced dog guy reads and will see the dog attacked unprovoked. No, he didn't. There was about 40 fucking cues that you just missed, prior to them doing it. And so that it falls right in line with that, which is, again, it's interesting, the parallels that exist. One question I had, and this is actually going back a little bit to, the initial, how you developed it, right, is that my, I guess, hands-on knowledge of employing that tactic, how much of in the development phase was spent trying to utilize that against somebody, shoot fighters, grapplers, wrestlers who diving in on your ankles, and obviously I know there's a million different, subtle nuances to how things are going to be handled, but is there kind of a generic response to that, the lower body attack?
So the context of the spear system is truly for personal or operational defense. Mm-hmm. And when you train in a vacuum, we have another great little maxim that goes like, everything works once, it doesn't work twice.
Yeah.
So I've had lots of guys where I go, well, go ahead, tackle me. and they get slammed by this thing, and then they're like, let me do that again. I go, well, no. You know, I had a guy, this only happened to me once, and I should have known. It was like, you know, because I'd be in a class and I go, okay, who knows how to tackle? And a bunch of people put their hand up. So I went, okay, you. And as I said that, I went, oh, because I was just here. I said, okay, you. He had his hand up first. And then I turn, I see cauliflower ears. I'm 5'8". He's 5'4", 5", really low, you know, and hips are everything, and like in that sort of thing. And this is an interesting thing, because I'd never been tackled in this demo, and this was a SWAT class, and I'd never been tackled in this demo, because I don't set it up with get in a 2-point stance and get ready. I set it up with, like, for example, okay, Mike, go ahead, tackle me. So you got to move the mic, get out of your chair, and while you're doing that, I'm gone. Right? And I'm trying to show people context and scenario that if you let a better striker start his punch first,
you're going to lose.
You're going to get punched, right? If he's in the right range. So, you know, so my context is this: in what's faster, action or reaction?
A reaction.
Okay. A lot of people think reaction's faster, but mathematically and physics level, action's always faster than reaction. If you look at, and just so you know, I ask that question all over the world. Everyone says, because reaction's got a connotation of like, oh, it was a reaction, super fast. But if we're standing with an arm's reach, and you go, what are you looking at? And I go, well, and I throw a punch. There's no way you're blocking it if we're both, you know, measured up pound for pound, right? And so that's action is the bad guy. Reaction is what the good guy did. And if you look at real incidents like that, you'll see what I'm talking about. But if you look at it from a physics point of view, they always say actions first and reaction. So what I did is I looked at, if action's faster than reaction, what's faster than action?
Well, the whatever term you want to use for preventing.
Right. And so that became inaction. So, you know, and so if we look at this here is, you know, this is reaction, this is action, and I started going, well, what's going on here? I started to have to think about, what is the bad guy thinking? He's going to throw a sucker punch here. How do I, if this is stimulus response training, how do I look at it and go stimulus, 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 stimulus? What happened before, what happened before, what happened before, what happened? And this is you saying, I saw 40 cues in that dog. You didn't, and that's why you suck, or that's why that happened.
Yeah, that's why you got bit.
Right. And so I'm looking at stuff. I've been in bars where I go, hey, let's move, let's go there. What are you doing? What's up? Come here, move, boom. And all of a sudden a bottle comes across the room and a fight breaks out.
Yeah.
And people are like, holy shit. They're looking at me going, wow, how'd you do that?
Some Jedi shit.
Right. And they're going like, how did you know? And I said, well, maybe because two people were screaming at each other and shoving each other. Like, people don't notice shit.
Yeah.
It's not part of their reticular cortex, or a big fancy term for their part of their brain that tracks awareness, things that are important to them. And so, I lost where I was, but it was a.
Well, I guess the question I had as it relates to, you know, the system, as it were, is that, you know, in an instance where, I guess from a training standpoint, is that am on board with and completely understand from a stand-up standpoint, but should you find yourself, a guy's got a fucking double leg on you, you know, you didn't respond.
So I got two amazing, and I'm a storyteller, obviously, but I believe people remember stories and maybe not formula.
Yeah, for sure.
And so what I developed is a whole system that was based on inaction beats action, action beats reaction. If I'm reacting to a confrontation, I'm late. I'm now on defense.
Sure.
So I want to be able to go, oh, fuck, here we go. Because philosophically what happens is this: situational awareness tells you something's about to happen. I got every victim of violence who lived to tell the tale said they had a bad feeling. So we have an internal GPS that goes, shit's about to happen. Then you get a fear spike, and type A personality warriors don't like to use the word fear, right? But if you talk about it enough, they'll go, oh, okay, I see what you mean. I just use the word fear spike because it's part of, you know, fear arousal. It's part of like research and science.
Yeah. Well, I actually had the same conversation with my daughter on the way here. She was talking about being scared of something. And I said, well, you know, there's times I get scared too. You know, when I was in war, like, you see this building over here, imagine that building. you know that there's a number of armed men in there who, as soon as you go in there, are going to try to kill you, and you know you have to go in there and kill them first. Would you be scared? Well, yeah, I would. I was like, well, so was I. Like anybody who says that they weren't scared doing that is full of shit.
Right.
But sorry, go ahead.
No. It's fantastic for you to share that, because there are people that give fear a bad name, because we're afraid of the word fear.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, because fear is the key to everything in your life, to self-actualizing and doing anything you ever want. You need to manage fear.
Yeah.
So we would look at situational awareness tells us something's wrong. Our nervous system then creates a fear spike. That's adrenaline, breathing changes, all that shit starts to happen. But your psychological system starts to fuck with your head at that moment, and you need to learn how to shut that down. So you don't want to have a moment of doubt, and if you don't stop that and change it, that doubt becomes hesitation. Doubt and hesitation becomes fixation, and then suddenly you're like, oh fuck. And so there's videos of guys not shooting, of waiting too long to draw a weapon, or saying, put it down for like 3 times.
Yeah.
And why are they hesitating? Clearly, if the rules of engagement were this person needs to be hit, right? And so I look at that stuff, and I look at that as an emotional psychological glitch, because the training was standardized.
Yeah.
Right. And so we would get into, going back to your question about the stand up, I get that, the striking, and I remember I was telling the story about the short guy. So we were in partial kit at the time, because the question came up, what do you do if the guy goes to tackle you? Because what happens is you go in, you white light somebody, he's doing this, your gun's on him, he's a no shoot, and what do? You sling your weapon, or you pull it back, you grab him, and you're pinning him on the ground. Well, while you're bringing somebody down, you're cycling him through a 2-point stance, and you're bringing him right beside your knees and your nuts and your pistol.
Yeah.
So we would start our training like that. We wouldn't ever go, okay, guys, let's put on our wrestling gear, and it would be like, okay, we just pulled a guy out of a car and we're pushing him to the ground, and he's now in this position right between our legs. And so we would do stuff there. Well, this guy takes me down. But I'm one of these guys where I never try to win something. I'm just trying to experience stuff. And I try to share that with the students or the graduates in the class. So he took me down, and it was interesting. It popped in my head now that when I selected him, I immediately started thinking negative shit. I went, oh, fuck, I picked the wrong guy. This guy you could tell he's an experienced grappler. He's got a lower center of gravity. And I actually said to myself, I said, this might be the time this drill fails.
Yeah.
And what did it do? Fucking failed.
Yeah.
He took me down, and so he's wrapped up on my legs, but I've got a plan B and a plan C. And by the time he unwrapped his hands and started to climb up me, I already had my pistol out. And my hand was indexed out, so his hand hit my face, and my gun was out here. So he looked up into the little hole of my training weapon.
Yeah.
So that became and I tell people that, I'm not saying that to go, look how cool and how badass I was. I'm sharing this because there's a lot of people who think I don't like grappling because I talk about this. Mm-hmm. I love grappling. I love all martial arts. I've been in martial arts my whole life.
Yeah.
But I recognize the difference between like your black powder rifle from the Civil War that you have as a collector's item and your Glock. I understand the difference in the technology, and so some stuff is archaic and some stuff is used specifically in a sports sense, and some stuff is like, no, I want my tomahawk right now.
Yeah.
And so I share that story not to go, hey, look how badass I am, because I don't have a gun on right now, so if you tackled me, that wouldn't happen. But in the context there was always when I teach, I go, this could fail. The move I'm teaching you that I believe in could fail. What are you going to do? Yeah. There was always a Socratic, how are we going to save ourselves if this fails? And that's what made the training interesting. Yeah. So there was always permission in the class. What if the guy does this? What if he does this? And then we go, well, is that possible or probable? Because everything's possible, but not everything's probable.
Yeah.
And so we would narrow down the probabilities, and then we would play in that area. I had a guy, another military group where, look, size matters in a fight, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a really good driver and I'm a really good driver and we do demolition derby and you got a Prius and I got a fucking,
F-250.
Right? It doesn't matter how good a driver you are anymore, because as soon as I hit you, you're done.
Yeah.
And so I tell people, like, skill matters, and size matters and mindset matters. And so I'm up visiting, I'm about to do some training, and the guys are all grappling. And so there's one guy who is about my size, he's getting tapped out. But the other guys he's grappling, there's two other guys in the room. They're 220, 230. They've all been grappling for 3, 4, 5 years. Size matters. He comes over, he goes, no matter how good I get, these guys, they'll always tap me. I go, listen, that's how it's always going to be. Dude, sorry, kill yourself now.
Yeah.
Because if they keep training and you keep training, they always have 40 pounds on you.
Yeah.
And so if you start to get a little too strategic, they're just going to go, you know what? Clamp.
Yeah.
And they're going to muscle it.
Yeah.
I said, but do you want to know the counter to everything? And he goes, what? I go, do you want the counter to everything? You go back in there. I will tell you one thing to do, and I guarantee it'll counter anything they're doing. So he looks at me like, what the fuck, right? And this is like a tier 1 unit, right? Mm-hmm. Do you know who Ernie Emerson is? Do you remember Emerson Blades?
Yeah.
So Ernie's an old buddy of mine. He gave me one of his first folders, a training folder, and I had it in my bag. I said, I'll show you the counter to everything. He goes, okay. I go, but you got to do this, okay? This has to be like dramatic. And I want you to pretend you're in a fucking movie when this happens. He says, okay. So I go over, I open it up, I take out the blade, and I see him. This is the interesting thing is I pull out the blade, he sees the blade in my hand, and you see him do this. Like you can see his body move. And this is what I mean, that's a flinch. Mm-hmm. Just because I demo this for dramatic purposes, if you walked into a room and everyone was dead and heads were cut off and your asshole got tighter and you held your breath, that's a flinch. I tell people that if a scenario changes part of your normal operating system, that's your body getting locked down. So if you walk in and you go, holy fuck, if in that moment while you're going, holy shit, look at this, an attack happened right there. If you went like, seriously, at that nanosecond had that happen, I wasn't looking around. Mm-hmm. I was like, whoa. So I need everyone thinking like startle flinch doesn't mean I went, oh, fuck, and did that. It could just mean I just went, oh shit.
Yeah.
And so he sees me, I pulled the knife out, but he just sees it in my hand and I see his body move and I go, it's just the trainer. And I open it up and I show him how dull it is. And I fold it. I go, put it in your pocket. The guys are going to muscle you. You're a good grappler. They're going to muscle you. And then at one point while they're doing that, resist, take it out. And I want you to fucking open it as loud as you can and fucking jam the guy. I said, but you got to do it or it's not going to work. He goes, well, you know, he's a tier 1 guy. What's he going to do? Is he going, I don't want to do that? Of course he wants to do it, right? Yeah. So he takes it and they're grappling and dude, he didn't even have to stab the guy, right? It'd be like if we were, you know, you're brushing your teeth and all of a sudden I chamber around near you. Yeah. Like you're like, dude, what the fuck is like, yeah. Right? And that's what I'm talking about. If a stimulus gets introduced too quickly, your body's, and I talk about this, your startle flinch system picks up where your situational awareness left off. Mm-hmm. It says, hey, you didn't see this, but we did. Yeah. So we're gonna fucking do something. You need to catch up. And that's the magic of that. And like when this guy's grappling, he's like here like this, he pulls it out, click, opens it up, and the guy backs off him, flinches, goes, what the fuck, man? You fucking knife? He's just a training knife. Like, you're like, dude, fuck, you fuck.
Yeah.
You know, so it was funny in the sense of, and so to answer your question, like, what about a shoot fighter? What about a grappler? There are guys that'll take you down, but the context was this. Like, I had one of the big guys, and somebody asked me that question, and I said, listen, I'm not going to let you get into 2-point stance where you've got angle and leverage, and you're moving forward, and my knees are exposed, and I'm like coming through here looking up and let you tackle me and not expect my knees to get blown out or you to double leg me or take me down. I would always say, what is the context? What is the scenario? And then we're going to do a proof of principle there. So this one guy, and just an example, just to beat a dead horse, I said, you're on the ground and I'm going to flex tie you. And so you're spread out here because a team is on you, and you decide that the moment I touch you, this is your last chance. You're going to try and grab me, grab a grenade, grab a knife. You're going out in a blaze of glory. I said, so the moment I touch you, so he's on the ground. I'm going to put my foot right beside your shoulder. All you got to do is grab it and then crank on it. I said, do you think you could take me down from there? He goes, fuck yeah. I said, okay, so like you'll do that. So everyone's standing around and watching. And I wish you could see this, but you know, he's down there, his head's here, His arms are here. I step in here. Well, we have a move. So I've surgically dissected where my shin's going to go into this nerve point in between the brachial and the trap. And as he steps in and grabs, I drop my center of gravity just as if I'm lowering myself to take a shot. My shin, the harder he pulls to try and change the angle of my leg, the more pain he puts on him. Now, if I don't do anything, he'll eventually roll the knee, right, and take me down like a regular takedown. Mm-hmm. But there's a stall there, and so everyone's watching. He's there. He's driving and grinding. And what I do is I take out. We had training weapons, and they were real guns made safe. So I took out. I had a 45. I take it out, and while he's taking me down, I look at the guys and I do this, and I pull the trigger, simulate pulling the trigger, 6 shots, and then I'm slowly falling down. I pop the mag, I take out another magazine, I load the gun, simulate chamber. He falls down, he looks up, and the gun's pointing at him, and he looks at me, goes, "Wow, I got you down, but that was fucking sucked, and it took me way longer than I thought." And I said, "You know what? And you're tougher than I thought, because I actually emptied a magazine in your back and still had to reload the gun." Yeah. And he looked at me, he goes, "What?" And I looked at the guys, I said, "Listen, I love grappling, and grappling is important. The hardest guy to take to the ground is somebody who's not afraid of the ground. So everyone should know how to grapple. If you're afraid of the ground, you're going to look down, you're going to fall down." Yeah. I said, "But they can't be the panacea. It's not the holy grail. You shouldn't want to be on the ground in a real fight, especially with kid on." Yeah. Right? Yeah. Or on concrete. And I said, never forget. So remember I said it early on, I said, what's the scenario? Yeah. The scenario here was I needed to flex tie somebody, but I'm not going to lose my life and compromise the mission because this guy turned it into a death match. Yeah. And so I'm not going to pull guard and try and do a triangle choke or guillotine the guy when I should shoot him, because that was the scenario. Yeah.
No, I love that you bring that up, and it's, to me, that's one of the things that I, in the experiences that I've had with, different guys, different systems, different, units that employ, whether it's this system, that system, Krav Maga versus fucking whatever, is exactly that, that just like with everything else in life is that there's balance. And I think, that combination of having a good working technical knowledge of grappling in conjunction with, the situational awareness and the kind of really, to me, the system that you're talking about and that you've developed is as much of a mentality as it is anything.
Well, but it's all governed by that mentality. It's all governed by the mindset. In other words, the grappling, the striking, the kicking, the improvised weapons should all augment the mission statement of what do I need to do. Yeah. And so we have guiding principles in our system, and every drill, from who the role player is, what their behavior is, to how hard or how fast we're going to do something. It's all to serve. What is we always say what's the scenario, but that could be what's the mission.
Yeah. No, I love it. I think it's really really cool shit for sure. One thing that I have written down that I know you've talked about it a little bit, but in terms of other real world fights, I know the metric is kind of ideally you want it to be 0, but have there been other instances that, well beyond this, whether it's, guys you're even training with that you go out at the end and they have one too many and they want to take a shot at the fucking time? I mean, have you been in many?
That's funny. So my focus has always been as physically adept as I've tried to make myself. I've always been fascinated with the de-escalation and the diffusing, and I've got like some insane stories about
almost getting into a fight.
Yeah, a friend of mine was killed in a car accident in university, and I was like, at this point, I'm well into stuff. I'm in my early 20s at this point, 21, 22, and had trained people, and I was at a band with this guy, and I get this call that Jim's dead. What the fuck? Oh my God! I go to Toronto. Is actually I was a little bit older at this point because I'd left school, but we get like shit faced, right? And I'm at this bar, and my buddy's drunk and I'm drunk, and he was one of my first students, and there's a bunch of like guys at the bar that are all like shirts open here and big chains and puffing around, and we're drunk, and my buddy Trace goes, look at these guys, I can't believe these guys. And I'm like, look over, and I go, which way to the beach? And I'm drunk too. And apparently we thought we were like talking under the cone of silence, right?
Meanwhile, you're screaming.
Yeah, we're fucking, because there's like music playing, and the next thing we know, they're like glaring at us, staring at us. I guess obviously it looked like we were making fun, and nothing happens, but there's really a lot of tension. And I go, you want another drink? He goes, yeah. So I go over to the bar, and I'm waiting, and I walk around, and I'm like, like you're drunk, like if there was tension, and then it's like, you want a drink? And then I forgot about it, right? And I go over, and I'm waiting for the bartender, and when I look back, the three of them are standing around the table. And my student, Trace, is like on the table with his hands just like that. And I knew that was a tactic. We practice all this shit. Like you're at a bar, I could see like his drink was here where he's ready to grab and hit something. His hands were up, so his throat's protected, and you can fire a shot right away or whatever. And I see that he's ready, and these guys, but immediately I looked at this, and I could have gotten the bouncers, and I could have done this, but immediately, like I've always said, that it's so much easier to hit somebody than it is to get inside somebody's brain. And I was always fascinated with that and challenged with the diffusing and de-escalation. And so immediately I noticed, and I always talk about like the predator-prey interaction, that when it was two of us, the three of them didn't come over. But it was only one of us, the three of them came over. So I noticed that right away. And I walked over with the drinks, and I kept them in my hand for a second because I wanted like shit that I could throw and whatever. So I'm thinking tactically improvised weapon, but it's all like this Trojan horse thing, right? I'm not going, what do we have going on here, right? And that's the big mistake guys make all the time, or anybody. It doesn't have to be a guy, but never betray the element of surprise. Always remember the Trojan horse metaphor, right? Don't let anyone know what's inside you. And so I'm holding the drinks, and I go, hey, what's going on here? And this guy's like staring at my buddy, but like freaking, like not even, hey, what were you guys looking at? And he's just repeating himself. And I look at the guy, and I say, hey man, dude, are you okay? Do you want one of these drinks? He's not even, you won't even like break contact. He's like, it would look like you trained him and he's one of your dogs. His eyes are locked on my buddy. And I said, did you guys think we were making fun of you? Did you see me? And I put the drinks down. Did you see me doing some muscle poses? And the guy doesn't look, he goes, yeah. And you just see, and I go, well, take a look at my friend here. He's a fucking ectomorph. No matter how much protein he puts in his body, he's always going to be skinny. Sorry, bro. I go, look at me. I'm kind of a mesomorph. And he kind of looks at me, and I go, so, I work out a lot. And I was looking at you guys, and I'm looking at first of all, the shape of your deltoids, dude, kind of freaked me out. And I was like talking to Trace about bodybuilding and movement, and we were kind of using you guys as like models. And he's looking at me, he knows I'm fucking lying, but it's so good that he's going, is this fucking live or Memorex? Nobody will know what that reference is, but you do. Like, yeah. He didn't know if this was like, yeah. And I said to him, I said, yeah. I said, like, so seriously, like what do you do for your shoulders? And what I've been teaching people, like in de-escalation, is that you're on channel anger, and you have a remote control that can switch to Love Boat or to the Purge, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And so I can get in your head,
flattery,
and and I always tell people, like, we call it choice speech, and we talk about that if you can create conscience and accountability, that you change the factor of de-escalation by massive amounts. And we've seen this like with like fucking world-class predators that are told something, and you can see them go from I'm about to kill you to, wow, and if you can, as I always say, before you need to move, is there one last cell in that person that you can talk to? Mm-hmm. The human cell, find that. Because when this individual was born, they weren't evil like this probably. Mm-hmm. So something happened. And it doesn't mean that you don't need to stop them and terminate the threat, But if you can get the person to be less dangerous, that's my whole thought of it. It's not that I'm not a social worker or anyone listening to this, right?
Hostage negotiator.
Yeah, but I'm like, but I know hostage negotiators that have come out of rooms and said, shoot this guy as soon as you can.
Yeah.
Right? Where most won't. Yeah. They're like, think everyone can be saved.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing in personal defense, is you need to know,
yeah.
Morally, ethically, you should try to diffuse it, but if it doesn't work, what's playing in your favor is the fact that maybe this person likes you a little bit more, or
is at least they're distracted.
Yeah, they're distracted. They're listening, so you got a better chance of deploying something.
Yeah.
But in this case, in the bar, man, it went nowhere because I'm looking at the guy, and like my backstory was so amazing with the whole thing. He looked how skinny he is, and hey, if you thought we were fucking with you, man, we apologize. And you could see I want to fight, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to here, and. So I've had, incidents like crazy shit like that, and students, who've had stuff, and I've had, military and law enforcement stories, and people like using some of this stuff. I mean, I got a letter from a SWAT cop who said to me, because of the training and what he understood about mindset and movement, he said, if I hadn't trained with you, I'd have had to kill this guy. And I didn't. I hit him, and I was able to say some shit to him, and I talked him down, and because he was reaching for the gun on the seat, and I was able to but to get a letter from a cop that said, this guy's alive because he wasn't talking about himself. Yeah. He was saying, this guy's alive because of, and I want people to know, like, I'm not bragging. I wasn't there. I'm the fucking coach on the outside. That's the warriors in the arena.
Yeah.
It's not. I want to be clear, and I shouldn't be defensive about it, but I'm very. I guess. My daughter would call me a snowflake, but I my fatal flaw is that I'm trying to make the world safer. I've always wanted to make people safer. So it bothers me so much when people go like, I don't care what you do. I just want you to understand this more so you're safer.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that aspect of it up, and getting letters from other units or from operators in all these different capacities. Could you share a story or two of some other instances where guys that you've put through some of your training that have used it in real world and it's benefited them?
Yeah, I mean, some of them sound like war stories where I weren't there, so I'm a little self-conscious about sharing stuff. But I've had I get an email like every month, every week. Sometimes it depends on what's happening. But I used to tell guys when I would train them, operator courses, saying, hey, you make your everyday stance your fighting stance, make your fighting stance your everyday stance, Musashi. And I would have them, because everyone had a pistol stance, then a long gun stance, and feet would change, an angle stand, an empty hand, a knife stance. I go, I want one stance. Yeah. So that if you're fucking drying yourself off from a shower and something comes in and you drop that's your stance. You're not doing this, covering your nuts. You're fucking ready to go. And then if I throw you a Benelli shotgun, you go, and then you're in that stance. And if it's an M4, you're in that stance. And if it's, and so after 9/11, one of the guys that I had trained a lot with, I was down in at Bragg, and we're talking, and he said, man, we went into rooms where, and I used to make this joke that the military fights and rarely trains, and law enforcement train and rarely fight. Or no, it's reversed. That cops rarely train and always fight, and the military always trains and rarely fight. And then 9/11 happened, and guys are just like gone. And this guy that I'm talking to, he just goes, dude. He said, I remember one room coming into, and there were like 14 other guys in there. We had to hit every single one of them. We were running out of flex ties. And like all the stuff that I was telling them about, because we would do when we created an operator program based on the spear, I would show people off of a long gun. I'd say, you take your shooting hand off the gun and hit the guy with this side. And everyone go, I go, you all made a face because I took my shooting hand off the gun. I go, you guys all practice shoot, no shoot, right? And they're like, yeah. I go, you ever heard of no room to shoot, no time to shoot? And they're like, no. And this is back before then. So I created that. It became part of the culture of no room to shoot, no time to shoot. So I tell people that's when you come in to a situation where the guy's right on you, and that little hole is nowhere near the guy. And you got a sling and you got a gun here. It's called no room to shoot, not trying to shoot. You don't need your hand on the gun right now. You need your hand on this bad guy or on another weapon. And so I created all these protocols, and I created these drills where if I came in a door and there was a guy here and I needed to smash him into somebody else's field of fire and I didn't have a threat, what's wrong with smashing him and coming? It was amazing to see, again, I don't like the term muscle memory because there isn't anybody, but just this cultural indoctrination of never take your shooting hand off the gun. So there were all these things. So I started hearing stories of like people using our muzzle strike tactic, our things, and I was like, holy shit, it was almost like me vicariously living through. So I had lots of physical stuff. One guy came in a room, shot through his arm, and we would do drills like this where we would do like these, psychological malfunction drills. You got your weapon malfunction, you know how to clear it, but what about, okay, your arm is incapacitated.
Yeah.
So it would be like things where you'd have to hit with your other hand, and like, guys telling me, man, you fucking bullet broke his forearm, and his arm went down, and he fucking dropped the guy with his support hand, like let go of his long gun, fucking went right into, hits the guy, drop him, someone comes, it was like, and I'm like sitting there going, holy fuck. Again, goosebumps.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, there's no better shit than that, honestly. I mean, I experienced that when I, have gotten a dog and trained it or partially trained it or, whatever role I played, and now is with a police department, and I get, a text thread from the handler that says, this dog, this guy tried to rape this woman in a restaurant bathroom and peeled out the fucking window, and we showed up 15 minutes later, and the dog, tracked for 3/4 of a mile, found the guy hidden in a fucking swamp and drug him out, and, whatever. I mean, shit like that, to me, like, that's the whole reason you do it,
And
so.
That's amazing. You know in your heart that part of your training was in that fight.
Yeah, and to me, like, that's the biggest reason why I think, guys do, what guys like us do is because of that. It feels good to feel like you're still being part of the fight. In terms of kind of from a statistical standpoint, I'm curious, from your experience and perspective, statistically, like kind of transferring this conversation over into, as for the listener, what can you take away from it? Is that, I'm curious what you can offer by way of statistics in terms of the likelihood of your average person, like some of the things that I'm assuming you probably buffer into some of your courses of saying, you're this many times likely to whatever. Are there elements of stats that you kind of use to paint that picture?
The only one I use, I'm not a big stats person, just because I go like, you're the human weapon. Mm-hmm. You got to make, in your fight, your point. And the only reason that you're not doing what you need to do is because of fear. We all admire and revere courageous behavior. When we see it in the news, when we hear about it in the story, we're like, fuck, wow. And the only thing that stops us from being courageous is the story that is playing in our mind. I can't do this right now.
Yeah.
And so I really believe that if, we taught everybody how to rethink and relook at fear, we would see a lot of behavioral changes.
Yeah.
So I'm not interested in statistics. I'll like one of the questions I ask in my class, I go, how many push-ups can you do? How many push-ups can you do? And people will say like 10, 20 if they're there with their buddy, and their buddy says 30, he says 31, and they fucking elbow each other. Like the numbers are just what was measured, not what you could possibly do under duress or if you had to. So if I said to you, how many push-ups can you do? And you go 50, I go, what if I was holding a gun to your daughter's head? I go, well, as many as I need to, and you make a mistake, I'm going to fucking kill you. Mm-hmm. Like it's suddenly so what's the scenario? I change everything. So, and I get what you're asking. Like, I don't like, there's enough fear in the fact that somebody signed up for my class. I always make the joke that if the world were peaceful, I'd be out of business. What would I be doing? Yeah. Right? And so so if somebody signed up, I don't need to tell them, oh, by the way, the FBI says that you have but I do have one statistic I talk about, and that is mass murder and rape. That mass murders are mostly committed by family members, and rapes are almost always committed by somebody you know. Because in our mind, the average person thinks it's going to be like a complete stranger.
Yeah, and that's in a parking lot at night somewhere.
But it's this cognitive dissonance of like somebody I trust wouldn't dare do this, right? Mm-hmm. And again, in going along with how deeply I would fucking like, I'd see information there and I'd want more. So I was unraveling always. I remember reading a book that I picked up at the FBI. I was down at Quantico. And there's books that they have in their bookstore that you don't see in Barnes & Nobles, right? And so I grabbed a couple of things, and I'm reading this book on serial killers. And I'm reading because I'm thinking, if I had to fight a serial killer, what can I know about them? Because they're going to fight differently than a drunk in a bar. And like someone who wants to torture you and then cut your head off and then sleep with you might be more dangerous because he's a fucking nut, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember this one story where someone came in and killed his whole family at Thanksgiving. And they're describing the crime scene where there was all these adults and one 7-year-old. All of the adults were shot in the face or the torso and were found dead at the table. And the kid was found by the back door, reaching for the back door, shot in the back. And like people read it and they go, oh, next, that's horrific. I read it and went, how come only the kid tried to get away? And then I would just meditate on that. Yeah. Why did only the kid know there was danger?
I mean, my guess would be that, he's had a lot less time to desensitize that element of overly trusting somebody, that's close that he would know or whatever, is that the adults are going to give him more of a benefit of the doubt, where there's more instinct in a child because it's been deadened less societally. I don't know.
Yeah, and who knows, right? And that's a very interesting answer. I'd never even thought about that. Where my head went was something very simple, almost Ernie and Bert Sesame Street simple. Everyone went, what are you doing, crazy Uncle Bob? And they just sat there. Well, I mean, how long does it take to shoot 6 people?
Yeah.
Right? And there wasn't, I mean, everyone was at the table. So he did it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you shoot one person and then talk about how last year, he wasn't invited, like somebody's fucking moving, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's impressive just to be able to do that, thinking about it in that context.
Right, thinking about that, right? And so here's what I did, is I said, it actually ties into what you said, that only the kid recognized there was danger and tried to escape. Had the kid been older and we hear some heroic stories of current active shooters or somebody charging the gunman, like if that was a 7-year-old, that kid would run the other way. You're 17 years old and you play football or you wrestle or whatever, maybe you're charging the threat. But where I turned this into is that it was almost like, Roadhouse wasn't out at the time I was studying it, but you remember the line from the original Roadhouse, be nice until it's time to not be nice?
Yeah.
It was just that, is do you have that switch? Do you have the switch that you train in dogs? Mm-hmm. It's going to be cool. And then when he hears this command, that's a fucking light switch. And you better be right because this is happening next.
Yeah.
And so it's that sort of thing. As I really looked at that, and I would tell people, I go, think about this. When somebody violates that trust, what you're doing instead of fighting them and hitting them is you're going, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And
trying
clearly
to rationalize it.
Yeah. And you're clearly can see what they're doing, but you're not doing shit.
Yeah.
And I would always finish the story with the class. I go, how many of you have mothers? And most people had their hands up. I go, mine too. I said, guess what? If my mother came into my room and she had an axe in her hand, we better be in the fucking country. And the words coming out of her mouth right then need to be something like, go chop wood. The weapon needs to be congruent with the language. Otherwise, I'm dropping my mother.
Yeah.
And everyone looks at me. I go, how many of you could fucking just drop your mother right now? And you could see in the class people going, oh, visibly. And I go, like you're the guy that's the victim, or you're the female that's the victim, because you got to be able to just see it. Oh, you were my mother. Now you're this evil creature trying to kill me. Yeah. And this might seem crazy. People turned off the podcast at that point, going,
they're taking notes. Tony, the heartless, soulless prick.
Yeah, or they're like, this guy's full of shit. This is, but the idea is this: is recognize this. Like women would say to me, "Oh, you teach self-defense." I was going, "Hey, I got a class coming up. You know what? I'm either at work. Here's another stat. I'm either at work or I'm with my boyfriend, or I'm at home. I said, well, then you only have a 100% chance of getting attacked, because the places that women are raped are at work, with somebody they know, or at home. So you only have a 100% chance, So it's just.
Well, yeah. So one thing that made me think of while you were talking about the Thanksgiving scenario was, from an emotion standpoint, obviously, whether it's business, personal relationships, generally speaking in life, it's a bad idea to make decisions, that are influenced by emotion. I'm curious, from a training standpoint, is there any element of at least realizing that, talking about it, trying to suppress it, et cetera, or is it strictly from a training standpoint? Like in some of your courses, do you get into that more cognitive, just trying to make it very contrasted or black and white as it relates to the training, or do you delve into that psychology component of emotion and what role it plays?
We definitely parse out and break down and talk about the emotional arsenal, psychological arsenal, physical arsenal, but we keep it very specific to personal defense. Mm-hmm. But we also talk about, I call it the 3 I's: instincts, intuition, and intelligence. That you're going to have a bad feeling. Like I've looked at some. I'm walking down the street and I look at a bunch of weird people and I just walk by them, and then every so often I'll take a wider berth on somebody. I'll go, I'm not walking close to that guy, right? You do that too, right? Mm-hmm. You're driving. Everyone's a bad driver, and then there's some drivers you slow down, and some drivers you pass. You go, got to get away from this guy. And that's what I call the 3 I's. I trust my instincts. I use my intuition, and then my intelligence makes a plan. Yeah. So we get into it insofar as like explaining it in layperson's terms, but we talk about like you won't say what you need to, and talk about the 3 Ds: detect, diffuse, defend. Detect and avoid, defuse and de-escalate, and if push comes to shove, how do you defend yourself? The big epiphany for people, fancy word for light bulb, is when we tell people, when you think of D1, D2, D3, you think of an external skill set. Situational awareness. Hey, what are you looking at? I don't want any trouble. Oh, I need to defend myself. What I tell people, like, the degree of efficacy you have with that skill set is going to be proportional to your self-awareness with the same Ds. Situational awareness, meaning as it relates to self-awareness, do I realize that I'm an asshole, that I'm angry, that I'm prejudiced, that I put myself into shitty situations, or I hang around with the wrong people, right? Like that's internal. Why do I do this, right? I meet people that go, yeah, every Friday night I get into a fight at this bar. Well, change the bar,
stop
dude.
Going to the fucking bar.
Right? And it might be, and if it happens at 2 bars, it's you, motherfucker, right? Yeah. So, verbal defuse internal is how you talk to yourself. Oh, fuck, are you going to fuck this up again? Dude, like, take a deep breath, parasympathetic, chill out here. Hey, diffuse. Like, what are you saying to yourself? I'm not going to let this guy get away with this. Yeah. Like, that changes what you're going to say next. Yeah. And then the defend part is like, what do you value? What do you protect? So some of the most courageous things you can do is leave it alone. Mm-hmm. It's easy to get in a fight and break, when we do things in anger. So the emotional, so we go like that, like it's deep, but it's superficial. Yeah. Like, don't do things, like you said, hey, don't make rash decisions when you're emotional. If somebody's choking you, trying to kill you, it's time to get emotional, right? So
one of the questions I have, it's more of a, what's your personal opinion on it? Not necessarily this is your guideline. Maybe you have one, maybe you don't. But for you personally, like, at what point is somebody running their mouth, or is there a point where they've taken it to a point where, even if they haven't touched you, like, is there anything that somebody could say, disrespecting your wife, your mom, your children, saying they're going to do something to them, 3 feet away from you at a public place? Like, is there a point at which you're going to be like, you know what, motherfucker, here's the,
that's a great question. Actually, visualizing stuff is giving me, a little adrenaline.
Because to me, like, that's the thing that I struggle with the most, is somebody running their fucking mouth like that, and not just being a dick, but like doing everything that they can to try to piss you off, type of thing. And I think, especially when it comes to being a father of daughters, or being there with, a significant other or whatever, and somebody just violently or vehemently disrespecting them to it.
Yeah. Well, words can be violent too, man. Like I use that interchangeably too. Violent language and violent thoughts, and so the real answer is, and this isn't a challenge for any of your followers to, send me mean tweets and see if I freak.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where I've reacted to shit online, and then I'm sitting there going, well, fuck, did I just open a can of worms, and now this is going to consume my life for 3 days? So the real answer is perspective. I had a kid, and again, I share the story for people listening so you understand the perspective. I had a kid who got his dad took him to New York and got him a ball cap from, what's the famous Yankee Stadium, right? And he was downtown in Montreal, and so he was like 16, one of my students, and two like 18, 19-year-old punks stole his hat. And it had sentimental value. His parents were divorced, his dad took him on a trip, they were in a ball game and all that. And he comes into my office at the gym right after it happened, and he's fucking furious. And like I said earlier, with age, he's like 16, these guys are 18, 19. These are men versus somebody becoming a man. And they're pull the hat off and they're giving me that, and they're throwing it to each other, and then it's getting to this point until they just kind of like shamed him into backing down, and then took off with his hat. And he's fucking livid. And I said, let me ask you a question. I know you care about the hat, but if your dad were here, and I said, okay, I forget the kid's name, let's say it was Joe. I said, like, Joe is in the hospital. He was badly beaten by two much older guys because he was trying to protect the hat you gave him. How did your dad feel about that? Would he be proud of you for fighting for the hat? And there's some people listening that go, we always tell people bad guys only want property, body, or life. It's a short list, right? So you got to decide. And this is an interesting thing, because I share, so people go, so give a guy what he wants. If he has a gun and he wants your wallet, give it to him. I go, it depends. I never tell anyone what to do. I go, you might decide that's worth a death match. We'll tell you how to think about that. So we don't ever put people in a box, right? And we've got real life stories of people who, one of a purse snatcher tries to grab this lady's purse, and she yanks it back, and he punches her in the face. You see this like on CCTV, fucking drills her. She goes to the ground and she won't let go. And he fucking hits her again and she won't let go, and she starts kicking at him, and the purse doesn't break. And finally he goes like, fuck this. So we say bad guys only want property, body, or life. In this case, what did he want? Property. Because he hit her a couple of times, but then he left. So he wasn't trying to torture her, and he wasn't trying to kill her. He ran away. Bad guys don't want to get caught. They don't want things to take too long. They don't want to get hurt, right? Most of them. So her resistance triggered all of these, impacted those three, and it was property. When she was asked, why didn't you just give him the purse? We come to learn that she had a phone in her purse that she just lost a child, and it had the only recording of her kid laughing. And she would listen to it every day. And so in her purse was her kid. Yeah. You're not fucking taking... Now, every psychologist in the world will go, well, no, that's a clear dysfunction of, no, just give her... And as I'm maybe the only self-defense instructor in the world that will go, fucking good on you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I as with everything, it fucking depends. That's my answer to everybody's question. Well, how do you do this, with dogs? Well, fuck, it depends. But but to me, it poses an interesting thought process, and that I think everybody has their limit.
But here's the thing: it's an amazing question, and it's you've seen a lot of violence, way more than me, but I've been around it vicariously, and we're both 5 decades in, right? And so I don't know the demographics of people, but it's just us talking about it makes people safer. Here's why: because if I say, Mike, really? Look at you. You got your 2 dog entities here. You got an online business. You got a beautiful family. You've got travel. You got books. You got this. You punch a guy in the face that has glass jaw syndrome and you kill him and you're in jail for manslaughter and it's caught on film and you lose everything because he had Tourette's too, right?
Yeah.
And you just but what if he says this,
Yeah, is it worth it?
And that might be, so there's a certain point when you know you need to, that's why I said way early on that we all have a GPS in our body where and every victim of violence in the 3 decades that I've been interviewing people, I've been teaching, I think this is going to be year 41 or 42, but I've been 30 years since I started doing scenarios, talking to me, what do you mean you were raped? What do you mean you were almost raped? What do you mean you were mugged? What happened? What happened? What happened? And even, I talk to military guys, I go, what'd you do in that ambush? And they're like, oh, immediate action. I go, really? What'd you do before that? And they're like, what are you talking about? You just do immediate action. I go, no, were you walking around, fucking bullets come whipping by your head and you threw yourself to the ground and rolled offline and then returned fire? When you get them to visualize it, they all fucking did a startle flinching, and some people didn't get up and got fucking hit right there, and some people got pinned down, and some people did the immediate action and got offline. So it's not just the training, right? And so the deeper answer to your question is you give people principles and tools. You give them a process to weigh and consider an outcome. We plant a directive in our courses. My personal directive is if I'm faced with a threat of violence, I'll do what I can to absent myself, to get away from it with as little violence occurring as possible to me and to my attacker.
Yeah.
What does it do? And it was a little wordy there, but that's what it is. And it's written wordy like that, so you got to really think about it. To get away from the situation with as little violence as possible, and directed at me and my attacker. That gives me permission to run, and it gives me permission to kill. Because the question is, what's the least amount of violence I need to get safe?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a hashtag choose safety.
Yeah.
And I always caution people, don't confuse choosing safety with playing it safe.
Yeah.
So you have a situation where someone's mouthing off and they're saying stuff and they're just trying to push every button. As soon as you start, it's like the 2 wolves story, right? Which wolf do you feed? I mean, you go down that path.
Yeah.
How do you and this is what I said about the 3 Ds. How do you diffuse yourself so that you can diffuse the person? And a lot of times if you understand that, you kind of change things a lot.
Yeah.
And if the fight's going to happen, no matter what you do, and you'll find out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting thinking about it, and I encourage the listener to think about it, because I think ultimately, if the first time you're ever faced with navigating that is when it's happening, then it's way too fucking late, But one thing that I always like to provide the listener as kind of a takeaway, if you will, is, from your experience, perspective, and standpoint, what advice can you offer for people that want to learn, important factors for survival, gear for training, home gyms, awareness tips, things of that nature? If you can kind of walk the person through. Somebody comes to me and says, "Hey, I love the interview. How can I be better than I am?" Like, what is your elevator pitch to them of here's what you need to do?
So many things. I mean, a lot of it is if I was your fitness consultant and you came up to me, you would say, I want to lose weight, or I want to prepare for a marathon, or I got to get bigger, or I got to get stronger, or I'm injured, I got to rehab. The more specificity you have, the more. So I've got online courses, and I got videos. So I got 40 videos out there. So someone could say, I want to learn your system. Where do you want to start? Where should I start? Well, part of it is that. So I would tell people that the most important thing that you could educate is your brain. So train your brain first. The mind navigates the body, and so we've got a program called Cerebral Self-Defense, and it's all about internal and external situational awareness and understanding the blueprint of violence. Because if you look at things like an architect, you can go, I can see that's about to happen, I'm not going there. And that's really, like I said earlier on, if you Google the definition for self-defense, all definitions will say something like the physical act of protecting your body or your property. Mm-hmm. Even definitions start with the physical. They don't include the situational awareness or the verbal de-escalation, right? And so a couple of years ago, we sat around thinking about what would be the new definition for self-defense, and we came up with the working basis of when danger is imminent, choose safety. Mm-hmm. When danger is imminent, choose safety. And so that when you embrace that, you go, well, what do I need to know to choose safety?
Yeah, so here that makes me think of, me hearing it. I guess my perspective is one of the things you hear a lot is self-awareness, right?
Right.
Is that, it's easy to say, hey, that shit's important. Don't be oblivious, whether it's, hey, you're at a gas station, like don't be on Facebook while you're pumping and have no fucking
Head
clue.
on the swivel shit, all that, yeah.
But I think for a lot of people it's akin to, a fat kid saying, well, you just need to fucking work out harder.
Right.
It's like, well, fuck, I don't even know where to start. So I guess for my sitting here hearing you say that, it sounds like that's the ideal spot to start with for that, or?
Yeah, I mean, so like if you said, hey, give me 3 tips for my audience, I'd tell you this. Like every single victim of violence that I've interviewed or read about said they had a bad feeling. So the nanosecond you have a bad feeling, it's like someone took an egg timer, like a little hourglass that's really maybe 20 seconds worth of sand, right? And you're either doing this, going, okay, how long is this bad feeling going to last for? Or you're doing this, why do I have a bad feeling, right? And it could be health, it could be business, it could be self-defense, right? My vehicle of study is self-defense, but the lessons learned in study self-defense carry over to business and personal relationships. Mm-hmm. Detective use defend is ubiquitous. You can use that anywhere. And so the first thing is to trust your body's intuition, that you're never going to have a bad feeling without there being some perception of danger or risk. And then what your job is to move towards the danger and explore that. So if you think, you have an employee stealing from you, your cognitive dissonance is, that guy wouldn't do that. That's the exact same thing to, this worker is creeping me out and now he's following me in the garage downstairs and I've had this bad feeling like for months, but I know him, right? It's the exact same thing, the cognitive dissonance, shutting it down. So the first thing that you can do, it's free, it's organic, is GPS. Trust your bad feeling, and then address that. And I could give so many examples of that, that are just amazing. But what that does that's inaction versus reaction, because you're way outside what our military friends would understand as the OODA loop, right? But there's a deeper knowledge base inside of OODA, and that's understanding, how you feel affects how you think, and how you think affects how you feel. Both of them influence how you breathe, and that influences how you move, right? So we need, oxygen to the brain. We need things thinking, because I got to come up with a plan and a strategy. So you have your own GPS. It's hardwired into you. The next thing is managing your fear spike. When you recognize that there's some danger, you're going to get a fear spike. Just accept that. A lot of us weren't taught anything about fear. It was like, don't be a pussy, right? And so I grew up where you didn't talk about fear. And so when I would feel afraid, I would also think that maybe I wasn't supposed to be there, or I wasn't ready. And so I'd be fighting that battle as opposed to just relaxing and being there and trusting that my training was where it needed to be. And so by telling thousands of people it's okay to feel fear, and that there are lots of things in life that you need to do afraid. It's just the way it is. You're never going to get enough reps. Yeah. Nobody ever goes, oh, I'm so excited we're having a death match this week, because it's been like 2 weeks since I had my last death match,
Yeah. Well, yeah, that was the point in the discussion I had with my daughter earlier, was that to dovetail on to, anybody that says they're not scared is full of shit. But what the important thing, what's being brave, what's being courageous, is doing it anyway.
Right.
It's not the absence of it. I mean, to me, it's easy to do something if it doesn't scare you.
Right.
Anybody can do that. Everybody does it all day long. It's when you're fucking terrified of something and you sack it up and fucking do it anyway. But
so the thing to do is exactly that, is to go, okay, I'm afraid, but this has to be done. For you to get strategic, in other words, like mind navigates the body, for you to do that, the more you understand about the psychology of fear and stop thinking about the biology or physiology of fear. Because what we think about is, why can't I control my breathing? Oh, I got butterflies in my stomach. My hands are sweating. And we start now creating this inner spiral, like this vortex in our brain. And that's that doubt, hesitation, fixation, denial, apathy. And now we have anxiety and we're like not moving. So just understanding that, and that you control that, and there's just shit that's going to freak you out. And you go, well, I got to do this. Let's do it. Right. 3, 2, 1, go. And another myth that I'd like to bust is that you don't need to be a martial artist or trained to defend yourself. There are more, I wrote this in 1986 for an article. There are more people who defend themselves every day with no training whatsoever, just through sheer will and indignation. More people that doing that than there will ever be trained people who get attacked and successfully defend themselves. Like right now, somebody's getting attacked somewhere. And in 3 seconds, somebody's getting attacked somewhere.
There's another stat I got you to provide.
There you go. Thank you. You drew it out of me, right? But it's the idea. Damn it! I've got 3 stats I use.
Yeah.
But it's like, so every few seconds something happens, but the spin of it is that somebody's defending himself too. And it's interesting in our courses. In our law enforcement military courses, we've got some video of people who have trained with us doing our shit. So you watch it and you go, holy fuck, right? But in our courses for general public, Good Samaritans, citizens, civilians, we show like people who were never trained with us doing amazing, heroic things, right? And explain to them that, how did this person who is overweight, untrained, fight off this predator? It was indignation. My favorite word. Indignation is a special type of anger, right? It's almost like that rocket fuel. You can go you'll hear some people say, you just got to get angry. I go, no, you need indignation. Indignation is like post 9/11 indignation, right? So you read something horrible, someone injures a dog, right? Indignation. Someone abuses a kid. So you need to, part of our training. There are blocks that we do that are cumulatively a couple hours, where we get people to dig deep in during the class. So it's not just like breaking boards and throwing kicks and reps of that. It's a lot about the emotional, psychological. There's a question that we ask in the courses: what would it cost you if you didn't fight back right here? And you write shit down and you have a discussion about that, so that now you can extrapolate and go, what could it cost me if this happens here? This guy's just mouthing off and he's trying to get me to hit him, and then he's going to sue me, but I'm going to do, like, it just positions your brain. It's almost the same thing of you walking out and seeing a dog and you go, you need to get control of the dog right now, because this is what's happening in about 12 seconds.
Yeah.
Or an architect walking by a site and going, whoa, stop this right here. Did anyone notice that crack over there near that? And nobody noticed it because everyone's just doing their little piece here, right? So most self-defense training is done like that. It's compartmentalized. It's, this belt and this stage and this level, and nobody's like reverse engineering it from how does this apply in the big picture? And so everything should be in the world brain-based, Socratic. Why are we doing this? Solving problems.
And again, there are a number of elements in dog training that are that way. It's, let's just work on this specific thing, and they're not seeing the forest for the trees, so to speak, and not looking at the big picture of, generally speaking, like the problem is, one of my favorite quotes is Jack Sparrow, which I've mentioned a number of times, is, the problem isn't the problem. The problem is your attitude towards the problem.
Right.
But very similarly that way is that, people are trying to fix, well, the dog won't sit. How do I, it's not that he won't sit. It's that he doesn't fucking respect. Like, you got to work on your relationship first. if that's not solid, you're wasting your fucking time trying to teach an advanced focused heel off leash in Walmart.
Right.
Like first and foremost, you gotta get him to think that A, you're worth a shit, and B, not a total asshole. If those two things aren't factually accurate,
That's great.
Then you're wasting your fucking time doing anything else with them. But
that's great. That's good advice for parenting.
Yeah.
And good advice for friendship and good advice for coaching.
Yeah. I mean, spouses, teachers, coaches,
Right.
business owners, you name it. One thing, so I guess circling back, I thought you mentioned three things. So there's trust your gut. If it feels wrong,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a reason, and do something about it. Number two is that spike, that fear spike is real.
Right.
And what is
and then choose safety.
The third one is safety.
Yeah. So it's understanding your relationship between self-awareness and situational awareness.
Okay.
Recognizing and accepting you're going to get a fear spike and managing that fear spike. I consider those like they're not independent.
Yeah,
right?
two
They're
sides of the same
interdependent.
coin.
Yeah, they're you're not going to get a fear spike and then just have it just be there. It's just you got to do something with it.
Yeah.
So you either freak out and overreact, or underreact, right? Or you use it as a fuel. So fear can be a big catalyst if you learn how to reframe it.
Yeah.
And then the next thing is to choose safety. And the choose safety is like if I said to you, you got to take the guy down and choke him out. Well, if it's a gang fight or you're outdoors in some fucking, austere environment where like grappling right there might be as dangerous as not whatever. I'm making a stupid example, but the answer can't be solved with like,
There's no cookie cutter response.
like break open this box and the solution's right there. So you're always thinking. So we keep stuff principle based, super, super simple. Because what that does is allows your brain to be creative. And I've had, stories from people where they do like these, what I would look at as heroic things. And I'm going, how did you do that? And they went, well, I remembered your fear loop model. And they just, it was just this idea that when a stimulus is introduced too quickly and it triggers this fear spike, it puts us in a fear loop.
Yeah.
Where we're like a hamster on a wheel going, oh no, what if this happens? What if this happens? We're thinking about the past, we're thinking about the future, we're rolling around there. And until we stop and we go, okay, I'm in the fear loop, right? Like you keep wandering until you go, okay, we're lost. Everybody stop. You've been lost in nav courses.
Mm-hmm. No, not me.
Or not you, but of other people, right? But until everyone stops and goes, okay, we're fucking lost. Let's get a plan together. But if you never admit you're lost, you fucking, or you're, I call it the duress path, where you accidentally make it out there, but you're fucking emotionally scarred because like it was never strategic.
Sure.
So super, super simple. A lot of people think, we put together a course that was inspired by paramedics where I said, I call it Safer in a Day, Be Your Own Bodyguard, where I go like, hey, in a one-day course, I can teach you self-defense. And like the internet world just fucking flipped out on that. What they were unconsciously doing, they didn't realize their unconscious bias was accidentally replacing self-defense with their martial art. Mm-hmm. You can't learn jiu-jitsu in a day. You can't learn boxing in a day. You can't learn taekwondo in a day. You can't learn Krav Maga in a day. But you can learn how to trust your gut. You can learn how to verbally de-escalate stuff because you're already good at it because you've been doing it all your life. You've just, like driving is self-defense, right? Walking the streets and navigating, like a busy street is a form of self-defense. We've got 2/3 of the skill set of understanding where to move and put our body and how to talk to ourselves and how to communicate with people. That's 2/3 of real self-defense. The third part, the physical part, we use primal gross motor move. It's all based on startle flinch. We've figured out after decades how to weaponize the flinch. I had my 7-year-old daughter was hanging out with me at a seminar, and they're filming the seminar for CrossFit, and many years ago. She's 17 now, so 10 years ago, and she goes, Dad, and the spear movement of driving out your hand and having your extensor chain kick out. First of all, if I pick something up and whip it at you and you did that, like that's survival DNA. If you can sharpen it through cognitive, like neuropsychological understanding of how to fire those muscles, and now you do your 10,000 reps of converting the flinch and driving in, the impact on that is fucking insane. Yeah. We've had guys I've had guys, number two, say number one hit a guy and all we saw on my helmet cam were his feet. Like how we've had guys knock people, like hit a car and go over a car and have to go on the impact, because it's a quarter extremity movement that hits with the drive of your foot. It's like a split jerk for self-defense.
Yeah.
It's fucking insane.
Yeah.
So you can actually create more impact force with a full-on spear than you could like with a side kick or a fucking reverse punch on a heavy bag.
Yeah.
So I can spear you in the throat or head like as hard as I can skip side kick you. That's insane, right? So we can teach that because the kinetic chain of that is already hardwired. And if you can do a push-up, right, you can do a palm strike. And so I teach people, hey, you got danger close, you're going to be whoa, 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 whoa. Your hands are going to, I'm talking about like an untrained person, right, is going to do this organically. So if I walk up to somebody at Walmart who's not trained and go, boo, they're going to go, what the fuck are you, what's your problem? They're going to hit this nonviolent posture. There's going to be organic fear there. If I could get them to commit to going from here, wham, and smashing, like if that mic was somebody's face, and smashing them under their head and visualizing the angle of a Pez dispenser. Do you know how fast people get that? They're like crushing things like within minutes.
Yeah.
Because it's tied to what it'll cost you if you don't do this. There's a real emotional. And I can take somebody where I go, you know, I'm going to steal your water. Don't do that. I'm going to take your water. Okay, I'm going to take your dog. And they'll freak, right? Or they're, you know, your kid, and they'll freak. So you find those triggers, you plant them. So we can in a day get people like super dialed into that stuff. But this is not to be confused with martial arts,
right?
You know, and that's that big reframe. I don't know how I got onto that.
Yeah.
But,
well, no, I you know, to me, it's absolutely apt, and that it, you know, for people that want to learn, like I think, well, I don't think, fuck, I know, you know, it's a daunting task. Just, you know, the same analogy as the fat kid that's like, fuck, I don't even want to go to the gym. Like it's such a long road up or whatever. Is that, you know, for people that, you know, their schedule is what it is, you know, whatever, is just, you know, they don't have the ability or won't prioritize and carve out the amount of time it's going to take to become proficient at jiu-jitsu, at kickboxing, at Krav Maga, fucking whatever, is that it's a good bridge of the gap. And it's frankly, at least, you know, from what I'm hearing about it and from having, you know, known about it for years and, you know, looked into it enough prior to doing the interview, is that it's just good practical application that, you know, that keeps things very simple.
Well, I want to put something in perspective here. If you had, do you have a favorite race car driver? I'm not either, so I don't like Schumacher.
Well, I guess now I would say Taylor Canfield, because he's a former team guy who now drives NASCAR. But
okay, but you know, he could be at a car to light, and we could have Schumacher and Mario Andretti and all the greats, bring them back, you know, from if they're all passed away, whatever. The greatest drivers can be at an intersection in their personal vehicle. It's today, modern vehicle. They could be sitting there looking at each other. They know who each other. And then some guy racing another guy comes and blows an intersection and hits rear ends or head on or T-bones everybody.
Yeah.
What's going to save them in the car right there? Is it their skill? If you know, and this car is a jiu-jitsu car and this car is a Krav Maga car, you know, we could say, look, if you're in the Prius, you got a problem. If he's in the 250, you got, right? And so there is, in the analogy falls apart if you went, well, I was in an armored Hummer, right? I get that. Let's not be a dick. Let's go with the metaphor. What's going to save the person in the metaphor here is that head-on collision is a stimulus being introduced too quickly. It's the ambush in the fight that you knew could happen, but you didn't think it was going to happen right there. Because if you knew there was going to ambush right around here, you wouldn't go right around there.
It's realizing that it's about to happen and getting the fuck out of the way.
But it was the airbag that saves you in the car analogy. And the startle flinch is the body's organic biological airbag, right? So if I come at you with a knife, with a gun, I would pull something, that micro flinch will happen. It changes if you're holding a long gun. It changes if you've got a flashlight and you're looking at somebody's ID. It changes if your hands are free. There's a thing called the cross-extensor reflex. So if I'm holding my phone and my glasses and something makes me flinch, I actually contract and move in because the cross-extensor locks up around whatever you're holding. This is important shit that you need to know if you're a cop, if you're one of our military and you got shit in your hands, guns in your hand, shit happens, you'll lock down. So when you contract, there's a microflinch. But we've figured out a way after decades of studying shit and creating drills to make people literally safer. And I've been teaching this Be Your Own Bodyguard course for fucking 10 years. We have like a real life people going, oh my God, I was almost this. We had one actually, there was a gang's, they had to rape and kill somebody as part of their ritual. And there had been 2 attacks. It was outside Nashville.
Sounds like a nice group of guys.
Yeah. And I never even trained this girl. I interviewed her on my podcast. Her dad had trained her. This is how transferable it is. Her dad had taken my course, and the drills were so simple and so obvious that he trained her. And all it is your extensor chain is stronger than your flexor chain, right? And so your flexor chain pulls, your extensor chain pushes away. If you look at the neuroscience of the startle flinch, part of it is to create space from noxious stimuli, which means push away danger. And this is like neuroscience, it has nothing to do with self. So there's a scientific foundation to all this. She gets jumped, she's getting back in her car at like a 7-Eleven at night. And this guy comes, she sees this other car there. She sees there's one of the guys are missing. She saw them when she went in and had a fear spike right away, but didn't do anything about it. Came out, went to get in her car, saw the guy was gone. The other passenger was gone, and then she got jumped from behind. Remember I said all victims of violence? Like, she had 2 minutes to fucking circumvent that. Mm-hmm. But went back to her car. Still looked at it because it was still there. Missing guy, that's weird. And then got jumped. But when his hand came around, she saw it out of the corner of her eye and she flinched and her arm got caught. And she remembered the beautiful thing about the spear and the extensor stuff is it works on any plane. It can work when you're on your back. It can work if the attacker's behind you. It can work if the attacker's in front of you. He's grabbing like this, her hand's up there, and she remembers from doing the drills. We do these bear hug drills to teach this, where the hands came out, and she was able to pry him out to here, and his hand's still wrapped around here. She had fucking mace on her keychain. And she, from here, turned it around and sprayed her and him over his shoulder and fucking hit him with it. Yeah. Bad guys what? Property, body, or life. He had to take her as property, to rape her, then to kill her. So there was a timeline. Bad guys don't want to get caught, get hurt, for things to take too long. Her being able to create a little time break there and get to an improvised weapon changed their whole timeline. Yeah. He fucking let go and they took off. Wow. It was all in the freaking news but like shit like that where, she contacted me years later, and then I ended up, when I heard the story, it was like, holy shit, would you talk about that on the show? Yeah. But I just say that because we talk about, hey, a lot of people don't have years to train. I train some of the best fucking fighters in the world. It's just imagine like all of your cars don't have airbags. And I go, I can insert an airbag. Yeah. Like, why wouldn't you have an airbag? So regardless, you could be a black belt, in every martial art in the world. If you don't know how to weaponize the startle flinch, like the Israeli soldiers I talked about in the beginning, right? Yeah. Right. Then you're going to be the MMA champion, getting the fuck beat out of him by a chair. Well, maybe. And there's lots of evidence and examples of very trained people that have been fucked up and killed in real violent encounters. Sure. Because they thought, well, I'm this good, I'm just going to do that. Yeah. Yeah, and knowing that they're encountering things that aren't in the rules and have never been seen, or totally. Well, a lot of times, if you're a good Samaritan, you just think you're going to bitch slap someone and go, "How do you like them apples?" Yeah. And this person's thinking, you know what, I'm going to kill this fucker. Yeah. And that's very different. That's a fucking dangerous game to partner. Yeah. Yep. I love it. If you could, can you just kind of go over the products that you have before we? Yeah, my wife had that thing printed for the No Fear seminar, and she's going to kill me. She goes, "How did you guys use that? Did you put it on the desk?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, we did. It was here, honey." It was so the most important thing. So the products we have of course, our training. We got training for military. We got training for law enforcement.
There's a lot of different courses.
We've got our Spear Fundamental course, which is like, how do you write lesson plans? How do you use it as expert witness? How do you, we've been around for 30 years and have had a lot of experience in many areas. And we've got an operator course, a ground fighting course, a weapon protection course, and they're all built around this whole notion of all fights are dangerous. The most dangerous fight is the one that you didn't agree to.
Yeah.
We've got, law enforcement military division. We've got a division for professional martial artists and self-defense instructors who look at, because probably the most important stuff that I do is the research around reverse engineering scenarios. Because the only way you ever got good at stuff, and even when you're training your dogs and stuff like that, you're doing scenarios. You can only take something so far until you put something in a scenario. You go, the training worked. This is functional. I feel good releasing this dog because they're doing what they're supposed to do. It's the same thing in the teams. You did scenarios, right? You hit houses, you had simunitions or UTM. Mm-hmm. You did stuff and you went, these tactics seem to work. Then you did force on force. So we really, really pioneered some cool shit with that. I spent 5 years creating a suit called High Gear. It's an impact reduction suit, weighs 10 pounds, less than 10 pounds head to toe. We got a couple of copies out there. Don't buy the copies, buy American. But it allows you to, the High Gear suit did for force on force training what marking cartridge sims and UTM have done for CQB.
Yeah.
Like suddenly if you're hitting things, if things are working. Yeah. So it gives people an apolitical way to test the theory of their training or their tactics. So you can go, I think Tony's full of shit and Spear's full of shit. Buy my High Gear suit, put it on, and because it's like a grappling mat you can wear in real environments. You can go, you know what? Let's get two cars beside each other and do a carjacking with our training weapons or our buddies, and we're wearing this gear. So we hit a car, bounce to the ground. So it's like you can go online and check it out. It's kind of badass. If somebody just didn't know where to start, I would tell them to download my No Fear seminar. I told you guys that I grew up like afraid of everything, right? And so I had to develop a way to look at it. And then I accidentally realized that a lot of people were afraid of shit. They just didn't talk about it. And then you could have some guys they're not afraid to, jump out of an airplane and maybe charge a threat, but they're afraid to say I'm sorry or I'm afraid to say I love you.
Yeah.
Right? And that actually becomes more of a problem in their life than the other one. So what's important, the idea is not the scenario like that. It's the idea is that managing fear in all arenas in our life is the big fucking lesson that we need to learn. And so a couple of years ago, I kept getting asked for doing private lessons and doing consultations, and people wanted, little things. And one day I realized that fear was the key, that the work that I've been doing actually worked for everybody, in some regards even better than me, because I'm the guy that was afraid it wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
So I had the double bind there, and so we created a program called No Fear, spelled KNOW. It's about metaphorically self-defense in your life, business, relationships, talking, self-defense. There's no physical, there's no like scenarios for it. It's a 90-minute workshop that has had like insane stuff. Because if someone said to me, hey, I only have an hour to spend with you, what are you going to teach me? You know that move that Sean Connery does in the Presidio, where he hits the nerve here, or can you show me mentoring? Like, people are looking for like some panacea, some little trick. I go, if you have an hour to spend with me, I'm going to teach you how to look at fear.
Yeah.
And it's not how to get rid of fear. Like, you remember the No Fear Company?
Mm-hmm.
I joked that, I had every one of their shirts, but no matter how many shirts I had that said no fear, I was still afraid. So the shirts must have been defective, right?
Yeah.
And so, I really believe that if you think that you are going to get to a place where there is no fear, and you believe that, and then something gets introduced that triggers fear, that can impact you more.
Yeah.
And that could fuck you up, because you're thinking, man, I thought my training was complete. Yeah. I thought I had the diploma.
Yeah.
So, so that's the really thing that I'm really focusing on now.
It's a good starting point for everybody.
Yeah, is like, because if you can manage fear, then you'll figure out how to fucking fight.
Yeah.
If you can manage fear, then you'll figure out how to quit your job and start the company of your dreams, or ask someone to marry you, or ask somebody for a divorce. Like, when things just keep going, the reason we're not doing what we really want to do is because of fear.
Yeah. I love the philosophy and how it's implemented, not just in a using the air quotes self-defense standpoint, but from a self-defense as it relates to every aspect of your life. I think it's really awesome. Where can people find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you and to look at the products you have and buy them?
The obviously, online, right? So the best is our website. It's Blauer Spear, Blauer Spear, SPEAR.com. And if you go there, you should find everything. We got a link, if you remember my name, Blauer Spear, and then /start. And I put one page that has every cool link you could want on there. Our podcast, our gear, our seminars, our
everything that's available.
Yeah, you can host, you can attend, you can everything's there.
Yeah. Okay. Social media wise, you want to shout out your handles?
Yeah. At Tony Blauer on Instagram, at spear.system on Instagram, and then if you just Google Facebook Tony Blauer, there's my personal and business pages and stuff.
Okay. Awesome. Anything you want to add before we wrap up here?
A anticlimactic ending because my throat just
seized up on you.
Yeah. No, man, this is awesome. I've been, like I said, we've been talking about getting on for a long time. Just decided let's just do it, and I'm so glad. The ribs are insane. What you're doing with the dogs is amazing. It's so important. I don't know if you get as much recognition or thanks for that, because in many regards, dogs are better than humans. And they it's great what you're doing with them.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And also in appreciation, same thing, for you. I really appreciate you taking the time to come here, and I have a much higher appreciation for the work that you've done and continue to do in pioneering a lot of the things that you've undoubtedly changed the quality of life for a shit ton of people. So
thank you.
I appreciate everything that you're doing, and ultimately, just very thankful for you to carve out the time to come here, because I know it's a big deal and a ways away, and it's a couple of days and all that. So thank you again. For you, the listener, again, if you're if you forgot about what I said at the beginning, go to teamdog.pet. That's where you'll find everything, that, and MikeRitland.com. If you want to do the online training, any of the products, CBD oil, all that stuff, that's where you can find it. I won't belabor the point. If you do have interest in any type of high-level leadership positions with Warrior Dog Foundation, go on warriordogfoundation.org. I'm going to reiterate that this is not day-to-day dealing with the dogs. This is more on the board type of relationship as it relates to the nonprofit organization itself, leadership-wise. But go on warriordogfoundation.org and feel free to support or help out, or offer to help out if that's an interest or a wheelhouse that you're currently in and want to get involved. Ultimately, to you, the listener, as always, I don't care if you're tired of hearing it, I'm going to say it every time, is that it's your support that enables guys like Tony and myself to sit down and flap our gums for a few hours. Your unwavering support is nothing short of humbling. Episode after episode, to get the amount of people that listen is truly remarkable and humbling. So thank you, as always, to your support. Keep fighting the good fight. Go choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.